Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the 5th part of What If Deku Were Dead and He Reincarnated into a Cat. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It felt like forever, but finally, Hitoshi was able to join in on heroics again. His wound was healed to the point that it wouldn't reopen and the pain was minimal. He was glad to finally be freed from the library and do some hero training with the rest of his class before internships were to start next Monday. They weren't doing much today. They were going back to the USJ to do some faux rescue missions as well as what to do and what not to do. The locker room was lively and loud as the others were clearly pumped to be doing this, especially with internships coming up. I'm going with fourth kind. Kirishima happily yelled at Monoma. What about you? I'm going with Fatgum with Yamomo. Monoma called coolly as he stripped out of his clothes. She wanted to go with Uobami, but I told her that Uobami was a rather bad fit for someone of her intellect. I explained why I was going with Fatgum and she agreed. I tried to get someone else to go with us, but he turned us down. Monoma snorted in Hitoshi's direction. Yes, Hitoshi did actually get an offer from Fatgum, and maybe when he first looked through his offers he would have gone with the man. But he decided to go with All Might in the end. It was All Might and All Might, or rather Toshinori trying way too hard, allowed Mas to join them. Sorry, he shrugged at Monoma. I got a better offer. And he started to slip out of his clothes. First the blazer that he folded and put it in his locker. When he started to unbutton his shirt, Monoma scoffed. Who? The hero made out of flaming trash. No offense, Todoroki. Todoroki smirked at Monoma's wit. Can't take offense to the truth. A few of them chuckled, and Hitoshi was one of them as he finally shedded his shirt off of his body and folded it up on top of his blazer. It was when he was undoing his belt to take his pants off did he realize that the liveliness died down into a whisper, and then just completely died out into a heavy silence. Then Hitoshi felt eyes on him. He cautiously looked up and realized that everyone was looking at him. Everyone? Did I say something? He asked. Denki had his hands pressed against his mouth as he just continued to stare at Hitoshi. I never put in consideration that you'd have a scar, Denki whispered, and that's when it struck Hitoshi. They weren't staring at him. They were staring at his torso. More specifically, they were all looking at his bullet scar. The circular scar was small in appearance, honestly out of his other scars. Aka, his failed suicide. It looked unimpressive to Hitoshi, but the rest of his classmates looked sad. Then, against his back where the exit wound was, Hitoshi felt something strangely cold touch the wound, and it made him shudder before turning to see just who was the brave soul to touch him without permission. Dark Shadow. That's who. The quirk gave out a soft, yet sad, chirp in response to seeing the bullet wound. Hey, it's not that bad. I lived, didn't I? He told the quirk in a more reserved tone. Dark Shadow sniffled, and Hitoshi watched as an almost comically large teardrop made itself known before the quirk shrieked. It made Hitoshi and the others around all jump at the demonic cry that left this quirk's mouth. Dark Shadow, please, Takoyami yelled and reined his quirk in. It's okay. Hitoshi is okay. It's not okay. Dark Shadow continued to screech as they cried, and tears seemed to waterfall out of their yellow eyes. I was right there and I couldn't do anything. Another unholy shriek that caused everyone to cover their ears to prevent rupture. Hitoshi was thankful that Mas was currently chatting with Nenzu. Hitoshi was the brave soul to take one hand off of his ear, and he reached for Dark Shadow. His hand made contact with the quirk's beak, and all at once the shrieking stopped and only mewling whimpers and sniffles could be heard. It's okay, Hitoshi whispered to the quirk while he continued to gently pat and stroke Dark Shadow's beak. My parents are pro-heroes, all of them, and there was nothing even they could do. Don't blame yourself. Dark Shadow sniffled and lowered their gaze downwards towards the ground. Hitoshi felt like he was trying to calm a horse. He gently shushed the quirk and stroked Dark Shadow's nose. There we go. It's okay. Look, it's just a scar. I'm fine. Everything is okay again. That did the trick, and Dark Shadow finally calmed down, and Hitoshi was able to get dressed into his hero costume once the quirk was settled down. What a reaction. Hitoshi thought, almost confused. It was just a little scar. Maybe he should bring this up to his therapist because he felt like was missing something. Hero names. What you'll be called for the rest of your career. It's a perfect identifying factor, which is why it must represent you. Midnight called as she cracked her whip into the doorway. It was the final class of the day, and Hitoshi didn't think they'd be choosing names so soon. Still, it's a good thing he and Mas already talked about possible names, and he had a pretty good idea which name he was going to go with it. After reading about the history behind the name, it was the best choice for Hitoshi, and he thought of nothing better. There were some good names and some duds, like Bakugo, Lord Explosion Murder. Hitoshi could feel Mas's eye roll from where he was sitting. Honestly, Mas scoffed with a headshake. Yeah, and just. No. Midnight shot Bakugo down. It's too violent. You need to inspire hope when they see you and hear your name, not fear. He's good at that, isn't he? Hitoshi heard Hagakure whisper and watched as Moss's ear twitched a little at this. So, sit back down and rethink your name. We'll come back around to you. Midnight instructed, and Bakugo was sent back to his seat. Bakugo gave a frustrated sigh as he sat back down with a grumble. Hitoshi was sure he heard him say something along the lines of "I was really hoping for that one." One by one names were made, some allowed, some rejected. Ida took up the family name of Ingenium. Cool. Todoroki went with his first name of Shoto. Fine, the fancy names weren't for everyone. Monoma was grinning as he showed off his name. Phantom Thief, because you'll never know I've taken your quirk until it's too late. It suited him. Finally, it was Hitoshi's turn. He walked up to the podium and showed his chosen name. Hypnos, he stated firmly. The ancient Greek deity, the personification of sleep and the name behind hypnosis, or as some of you may also know it as, brainwashing. Midnight's eyes lit up. It's beautiful and fits you perfectly. When I say I want you in a name, this is what I mean. Hitoshi blushed at her kind words. Well, he felt pink and must have looked pastel with both pink and purple all over his face. That's such a badass name, Kaminari called with a grin. Man, I should have gone with Zeus. Hey, stick with your own name and don't copy me. Hitoshi teased the blonde, which made Kaminari laugh before he rubbed at the back of his head. Fair. Kaminari raised his hands and let the conversation drop with a smile still on his face. Get your cat. It was Bakugo's snarl that made Hitoshi focus on the blonde. There, Moss had jumped on Bakugo's desk. It was like watching a dog that was on the verge of snarling but wasn't going to lunge yet. Bakugo's nose rose as he just watched Moss. Mossy, Hitoshi called, but Moss didn't come. No, he instead started to mess with Bakugo's sign. Hey, piss off. Bakugo tried to grab his sign, but Moss actually sat on it and continued to mess with it. Get your cat before it becomes a smudge, he roared at Hitoshi. Moss. Hitoshi stepped down and walked up to Moss. His cat worked faster once he realized what was happening. Izuku, stop it, Hitoshi told him through the connection. No, wait. Moss tried to stop it, but Hitoshi grabbed him and picked up with ease. Moss gave a soft mew in response to being picked up and even wiggled his paws in protest. Just erase that line. That one there, he pleaded with Hitoshi. Hitoshi looked down at the mess that Moss had created. His cat had erased most of Bakugo's chosen name and maneuvered the letters by erasing some letters into forming over letters. Hitoshi saw just where Moss was going with this, and he could only raise an eyebrow but complied. Despite knowing he could lose a finger, he took his index finger and ran it down, erasing the line Moss had wanted. It was very simplistic, but it brought Bakugo down to his core. His quirk. TNT, huh? Bakugo grumbled as he looked at it for himself. I'll think about it. Tell your fleabag to mind its business. He then waved Hitoshi and Moss away. What were you thinking? Hitoshi asked his cat out loud as he twisted Moss around in his hand and held the cat up in a way that Moss was tilted down. His nose pressed against Hitoshi's own nose. Moss meowed audibly. Yeah. Hitoshi shook his head and dropped Moss on the floor. Moss snorted and gave his fur a firm shake. When Bakugo came back up for his redo, he just showed his name, like Shoto had. I'll think of something later, he grumbled in response. Very well, Midnight shrugged. Whenever you're ready with a new name, just come to me, she told him, and he hummed disinterested as he sat back down in his seat. Hitoshi watched this before looking down at Moss. Moss was looking at Bakugo with a certain knowing. What did you do? Moss looked back at Hitoshi. Don't worry too much about it. Yeah, that wasn't ominous at all. You're going to be a good girl while Big Brother is away, right? Hitoshi asked as he tucked some of Iri's hair behind her ear. He had his bags packed for the week he'll be away from home, and he had his hero case in his hands. He was at the train station where he would eventually go to Might Towers with Moss. Iri gave a firm nod. Yepers, I'm going to be the bestest girl, she called in determination. Then she pointed at Hitoshi. When you come back, I'm going to be the first girl in my team to score a home run. Just you wait. Hitoshi smiled and patted her hair. I look forward to it. Be safe. Oboro wrapped his arms around Hitoshi in a tight hug from behind and grinned into his son's fluffy purple hair. And text us if you can. I'll try, for sure, he told Oboro. Hazashi came up and held onto Hitoshi's front tightly. Now he was being sandwiched between his two dads. We're going to miss you and Moss, kiddo. I just can't believe All Might allowed Moss to join. Neither can I. Oboro whispered to Hazashi. Most heroes wouldn't allow service animals in their ranks as it could harm the animal. It's unorthodox. Hazashi hummed and rested his chin up on the top of Hitoshi's head. Guys, I'm sweating. Hitoshi tried wriggling out of his father's grip, but they weren't letting up. Maybe it's because of a certain skill this cat has. Hazashi wondered after a second to think about it. Maybe, but I can't be too sure. It feels like something more. Please. Oh great. They were getting closer to each other like Hitoshi wasn't even there. Hazashi snorted. I agree. What does that man want? Well, Hitoshi made himself known, and he had enough room to duck under their arms and free himself from his brief tomb. This has been fun. Really, but I've gotta go so I don't miss my train. He gave himself a brief brush off and then grabbed his bag and suitcase. He gave both of his parents a smile and waved them goodbye. I'll see you guys on Friday. Moss, who's been quietly laying across Hitoshi's shoulders this whole time, gave his one wave goodbye as Hitoshi retreated. Phew, Hitoshi could only whisper. He watched as his classmates, and those from 1B also say goodbye to their other classmates, families as they bounded away to their exciting new internship. I do wonder what All Might has planned for us, Hitoshi thought to Izuku as he reached up and scratched his cat under the chin. I don't. It can't be much with that wound of his. He can only hold his form for so long before he's forced to revert back, Izuku told Hitoshi while he leaned into his owner's touch. I do wonder if he'll just relegate most of the work to someone else. You really don't like him, do you? At one point I did ... and we know how that turned out, don't we? A huff left Izuku's body as he stretched his front legs out lazily, extending his claws, before retracting them back in and sighing. Doesn't matter. I'm still curious about why he's doing this. Same. The rest of the ride was just speculation with the two of them throwing out theories as to why All Might was doing this. Eventually the train would come to their stop. Hitoshi hopped off of the train and was met with a man holding a sign. Hitoshi Shinsu was written in bold writing. After showing the man his ID, was then promptly swept away into a car. He sat in the front seat and off they went. Fancy, Hitoshi commented. Izuku didn't sound impressed. From there, the world passed them by a second time as they were being charted towards Might Tower, which wasn't hard to see as it's the tallest building in all of Musutafu. I dreamed about coming here once, Izuku said to break the silence. Yeah, I nearly did. I got as far as security before I was kicked out. Tried to say I was selling cookies for school. They didn't buy it. Izuku chuckled at the memory. All I ever wanted to do was see All Might. There was that sigh again and he shook his head. Oh well, it's over now. Hitoshi didn't know if Izuku was talking about his past hyperfixation with All Might, wanting to see All Might after having met him, or his old life ... and in a way it was all the same thing. Still, he decided it was best not to ask. The car came to a stop and Hitoshi was immediately swept inside in a rush by All Might's secretaries and through security. After everything was checked he was given the ultimate item, the visitor badge. Just scan that whenever you want to come back in and you'll skip security. The secretary told Hitoshi as she clipped the badge with a barcode onto his shirt. It'll be good for the week he'll be staying here. The woman looked at Moss and smiled at him. When All Might told us about a cat being with you we almost didn't believe him, but here he is. Such a gentleman. She patted Moss up top his head before carrying on. All right, All Might is waiting for you at the top floor. Hitoshi felt nervous despite his knowledge of who All Might really was. Moss really looked like he couldn't care less as he just rested his head on Hitoshi's shoulder. The elevator ride up was long. So long that Hitoshi took his phone out, sat down, and just started playing some games while he waited. Eventually, he did make it to the very top. He put his phone away and stepped out of the elevator and into All Might's massive office. The office took up the whole floor where pictures of ... himself hung off of every wall that wasn't a window. His desk was facing the city where it was surrounded by windows, so he got the perfect view of everything down below. It felt like a god looking down on its people in a way. Toshinori was puffed up into his All Might form as he stared out at the city below him, watching and waiting for someone to screw up and cross his path. They're here. All Might laughed without even turning around. I was getting worried you weren't going to show. Apologies, All Might. Hitoshi walked up to the man, but kept a good 30 feet between them. But we're both here now. All Might spun around with both hands on his hips as he laughed. Yes, you are, and I couldn't be happier. So, let's not waste any more time. Oh wow, okay, let me just get changed into my hero costume. No need. All Might stopped Hitoshi right there. We won't be doing anything like that, at least not today. No, today I need a feel of you. A what? I need to see how your fighting skills are. So, today, we'll be doing some hand-to-hand. Not with me, of course, no, you'll be fighting with a teacher I hired. Once we range your fighting as well as your weight and muscle training, then I can start making tweaks. Tweaks? Hitoshi rose an eyebrow, and he was sure if Moss had eyebrows he would have raised one as well. Yes, just simple things about what you need to work on. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Aizawa and his husbands are training you well. There are just some things I need to see for myself. Nothing bad, and I'll help you every step of the way. Hitoshi looked at Moss. Moss just shrugged. Of course, let me just get changed into some training clothes, he requested and put his suitcase down. No need. There it was again. No offense, All Might, but I really don't want to train in this. Hitoshi was wearing a pair of jeans, restricting, and a rather tight-fit top, also restricting. Oh, I get that, but you don't have to wear your clothes. Here at Might Tower, we have our own dojo on floor 50, and with that dojo, we have keikogi that you can wear for training. Don't worry, they're all washed daily. All Might laughed. Oh, okay then. I'll just leave this ... here. Hitoshi asked before he put his bag on the floor. Sure, I'll have a secretary bring them to where you'll be sleeping. Talk about whiplash. Still, Hitoshi cautiously put his stuff down before turning towards Moss and then at All Might. Okay, I'll see you on floor 50 then. Of course. God, this was just so awkward. What a weird man, Hitoshi thought, and he felt Moss nod. I have to agree, but at least he's doing something right. He's testing your skill in battle, and it's a good way to gauge your skill and see what you may need help with. So, a good enough start. I just can't believe he has his own dojo. What am I saying? I believe it. Hitoshi laughed and walked to the elevator. This week is going to be interesting, that's for sure. He smiled as the doors slid closed. Just a small bonus today. Oboro narrowed his eyes. 1.2.3.4.5. He looked at the cats that were all lying in the living room. 5. They had 5 cats. This was known. Why did something feel off? 1.2.3.4. 5. We have 5 cats. He felt like he was losing his mind as he counted the 5 cats. His eyes narrowed as something felt off. Something wasn't right, but what? Pumpkin. He pointed at the orange cat, Jelly, then to the white and gray cat, Tiny Tim, to his beloved Munchkin, Brett, the lanky Cornish Rex, and Moss. Wait, the black cat lying next to Brett, almost on top of her, did not look like Hitoshi's green and fluffy cat. Who the fuck are you? He pointed at the black cat that just lazily and happily blinked back at Oboro. Shouta had to give credit where it was due. He really thought Hisashi was going to be the first one to notice the newest addition to their growing army of cats. Izuku knew Toshinori had something planned up those long gangly sleeves of his. He just didn't know what. This was all too suspicious for Izuku's liking. So, while Hitoshi was busy eating the dojo floor 7 different ways to Sunday, Izuku took off to go exploring. He always wanted to go to Mike Towers, but as mentioned he was always intercepted. But this was more than just him trying to fanboy. His days of fanboying over All Might were over. Now it was business. Izuku eyed the elevator button. Both buttons were up and down respectfully, and he needed the up button. Izuku got down low, wiggled his haunch before wiggling his shoulders, then he leapt. He used his paw to press the button and sure enough it lit up. Izuku then patiently waited for the doors to open. It took a while, but the elevator would inevitably stop off on the floor he was on. The doors cracked open and Izuku stepped on. He was the only person on the elevator and he saw his first problem. All Might's office was on the top floor and Izuku was almost entirely sure no matter how high he jumped he couldn't reach the button. Izuku felt his ears go back as he stared at the button that was all the way to the top. Okay, he thought with a sigh. Then he backed all the way up to the farthest corner of the elevator and ran forward. He felt his legs pump with 3 mighty strides before he jumped. He used this momentum to actually run up the wall in one big stride. Up he went, and when he felt himself slip, Izuku managed to twist midair and press the top button with his hind leg. Yes, he cheered and flipped right back on his feet once on the floor. Phew. Izuku scratched his ear with his hind paw just as the doors shut. He shook his pelt vigorously before the elevator started to move up. Izuku got comfortable in the corner of the elevator knowing that the ride was going to be a while. He stretched himself out as the elevator climbed higher and higher up to the very top of the floor. It felt like forever until he finally heard that soft ding above his head, and finally the door opened to All Might's office. He heard a scramble for a moment. 1 second, All Might, or rather Toshinori, had fled to his own private bathroom. Clearly he had been in his skinny form and was rushing to puff back up into All Might once again. Izuku let him do this and just walked up to the man's desk. He jumped up on the desk and saw that Toshinori was in the middle of eating. It looked like something bland and mushy. Izuku dipped his paw in it. It was liquidy and he flicked his paw, causing some of the stuff to splatter away from him. He sniffed the remaining food on his paw before licking it. Applesauce, he realized. Very bland applesauce. Forgive me, All Might. The caricature of a man came bouncing into the room and out of the bathroom. I was simply. He paused and looked around in alarm. Then his eyes landed on Izuku. Why am I not surprised? Poof. Toshinori deflated and coughed horribly into the crook of his elbow. Fat droplets of blood splattered against the floor, and when he pulled away he had a dribble of crimson running down the corner of his mouth. He took in a big breath before he was able to look at Izuku fully. How'd you get up here? Is Hitoshi with you? Toshinori inquired. Izuku's ears went back as he mean-mugged Toshinori for a moment before he looked away. Right, that logic tracks. You hate me, that's why you came into my office. Alone. God, you are a strange cat, you know that? He then sat back at his desk. He scooted his chair in and grabbed his spoon to continue eating his mush. Izuku pushed the applesauce to the side before he could dip his spoon into it. It made Toshinori jump a little. The man narrowed his blue eyes and then snorted at Izuku. If you came here to get a rise out of me, little kitty, it's not going to work. Toshinori huffed and then reached into the desk drawer to pull out nori that he had stashed away. The dry seaweed crinkled as he pulled out a sheet to smugly snack on. Izuku walked up to him and he just continued to eat. So, Izuku snatched the dried snack out of the man's hand and just walked away with over half of the seaweed sheet, leaving Toshinori with a smidge. The despondent Sai spoke a million words. Izuku walked up to the edge of the desk and ate his little snack. "Why are you here?" Toshinori asked again. "Surely you didn't just come here to steal my food." Izuku licked his lips once he polished off the seaweed and just turned to look at Toshinori. "You know I can't actually answer that, right?" Izuku mewed out and started to groom himself. "Right, for a moment I forgot you were a cat," Toshinori whispered and went back to munching on his crunchy seaweed. Izuku snorted at him and almost wished for Hitoshi to help translate his wants. "A phone call is here. A phone call is here." Izuku was judging Toshinori hard at Toshinori using his own ringtone for his phone. "Just, who does that?" Toshinori looked at the caller ID and sighed. "Excuse me." He put his nori down on the table. "I have to take this. Don't eat my seaweed." Then he vanished off into another room in his office. "Don't tell me what to do," Izuku told the retreating man, and he purposely knocked the package of nori down on the floor, causing the stuff to scatter and break all over the carpeted floor. He should have invested in hardwood, Izuku thought as he jumped on the stuff to really get it into the carpet. Once his tirade was over against the poor seaweed crackers, he flicked his ear at the sound of Toshinori talking. "I'm already looking into someone." A small silence. "Yes, I know." Another small silence as Toshinori patiently let the other person speak. "I'm sure he's great. Look, let me do this. Don't you dare bring him here. He'll be turned away at the door. I'm warning you, this is my choice and my choice alone. Goodbye." Izuku gave a tiny jump at the volume of Toshinori's voice. He never heard him actually raise his voice outside of the USJ that was. Izuku tilted his head. God, he heard Toshinori sigh heavily. "Thick-skulled man, pot to kettle, you're black." Izuku shook his head. He then looked over at Toshinori's desk. The laptop that was sitting near the end of his desk was open and Izuku narrowed his eyes. He padded closer to the laptop before he jumped on the chair to get a closer look at whatever Toshinori was looking at. Izuku's ears went back and he felt his eyes grow wide at the picture he was looking at. The laptop was open to a news article. "Man found hanging from the second highest building in Musutafu." Included in the news article was a photo of the man. His face was blurred but his body was not. Izuku recognized the body. Without a doubt in his mind, the man hanging was Hitoshi's uncle, Jonouchi. Izuku recognized the clothing, and even though it was blurred, the dark blue hair was unmistakable. You noticed that?" Toshinori came out of the room and walked right back up to the desk. "I'm sure you already figured out who the person hanging from the building is." Izuku, in a moment of a reluctant truce, nodded at Toshinori before looking back at the laptop screen. "A good friend of mine is looking into it. They say he didn't suffer from the hanging. However, it's believed he was beaten to death, so he did, in fact, suffer," Toshinori explained, and he exited the article before Izuku could read any more. "I think it would be best if you didn't inform Hitoshi about this. This is the last thing he needs to know about during internships." Toshinori then made a shooing motion with his hands to get Izuku out of his seat. It worked and Izuku jumped down without a fuss. Toshinori sighed and scooted his chair in, clearly unaware of the mess by his feet. "You know, they should be finishing up by now." Toshinori looked at the time. "At least with training. His quirkless assessment will be tested next by the instructor per my own request." Toshinori muttered and then looked at Izuku. "So, you must be bored, aren't you? Is that why you're here?" Izuku's ear flicked at Toshinori. "No, I want to know what you're hiding." Izuku's eyes then narrowed and this didn't go unnoticed. Toshinori chuckled at him softly. "Well, I got just the thing for your boredom." "I'm not bored, you scarecrow." Izuku rolled his eyes. "I just happen to know you're hiding something because you are an open book." Toshinori got up, despite just sitting down, and walked off towards a closet. "You see, I had a feeling you would be up here sooner rather than later." He opened the closet door. "While I allowed you to be with Hitoshi, I can't have you distracting him while he's training, so I went and got you something." "What?" Izuku just watched as the man pulled the object out of the closet and turned to walk towards Izuku. Izuku felt excitement betray him as he shuffled his paws. "Is that what I think it is? Is that what I think it is?" Izuku got down and felt his whole body wiggle in excitement at the object in Toshinori's arms. "It is. Wow, ever thought I'd see your pupils ever dilate?" Toshinori gave a smile and placed the object down. He hardly managed to walk away before Izuku lunged. It was a cat exercise wheel. Like a hamster wheel, but for cats. It was one of the larger ones, not the compact one, plenty of space for him to expand himself out to the fullest. Once on, he started at a walk before he said screw it and broke out into a full run. He was at top speed in seconds and the wheel was perfect. "Oh, yes. Izuku felt amazing as he ran as fast as he possibly could. He wasn't allowed to run this fast inside the house. He could run outside, but was limited to the yard. "This is what I need at home," he thought as he charged forward. He loved this thing. "That'll keep you entertained for a while." he heard Toshinori say, and Izuku just couldn't be bothered to care. Izuku ran and ran and ran. He finally came to a stop when his stamina became low. He came to a not-so-graceful stop and stumbled off of the wheel. Izuku's legs wobbled and he collapsed to his side while panting with mouth open and tongue out. Well, that made you happy, didn't it? Toshinori placed a small bowl of water beside Izuku. Next time, pace yourself. Don't tell me what to do. Izuku wheezed and it came out as his weakest mew. He let his head fall and sucked in several deep breaths. It would be a small while before Izuku got enough energy back to lift his head and lap at the water beside him. Soft emlem could be heard as he mowed while drinking the water. Izuku relaxed. Do you like what I did? His ears perked. What? He whispered and looked around in surprise at the voice. Do you like what I did? To Jounouchi. The world seemed to crumble from around Izuku as All Might's office dissipated completely and he was back in the void, in front of the wall he made to keep him out. Do you like what I did? The voice was clearly coming from the other side of the wall. I think it was fitting. Hung like the dog he was. He was an abuser and deserved everything he got. Izuku's fur rose high and his back arched before he took several steps back. His tail curled over his hind legs. So do you like what I did? The Namu repeated for the third time like a kid expecting praise. No, I wanted to save people, not kill people. You're a monster. Izuku yelled at Namu on the other side. You're not wrong. I am a monster and I'm proud of it. I wanted to save people but that was in the past. Thump. Izuku jumped in the air in surprise when the brick wall gained a new crack right in the center. The wall was already cracked but now it looked like a tap would cause the brick to crumble. Izuku took several steps back now as his fur continued to stay raised and his ears fell flat against his skull. He looked at the wall in surprise as he took in several deep breaths. Then he gained his nerve back and steeled himself. You're no better than the rest of them. You beat that man to death. It's what he deserves. It's what all of them deserve. If you want to roll over on your back and continue to let abusers get away with their misdeeds, that's fine, but I won't. That time in my life passed. Now it's time for me to get even and treat those how they deserve to be treated. To show them it's not fun being on the receiving end. And I think it's about time I visit a certain childhood friend of mine. Leave him alone. And here I thought you stopped defending him. How pathetic. Wait. Izuku woke with a start and he jumped to his paws before he tried to take off. Whoa there. His harness was grabbed by Toshinori. It was just a dream. No, I have to stop the other me from killing another person. Izuku let out a yowl and Toshinori picked him up off the ground. How rude. However, Toshinori did not hold on to Izuku. No, he kept him off of the ground to stop him from running. Calm down. Toshinori demanded in a stern, but not unkind, tone. Clearly something must have happened, right? Izuku didn't want to play 20 questions with Toshinori, but seeing how the man literally had him suspended in the air, he had no choice but to comply. He nodded and Toshinori seemed okay with this. All right, call Hitoshi up here so he can translate. If it makes you panic, then it must be important. Izuku almost complied. He stopped before he linked with Hitoshi and looked at Toshinori. How do you know that I can talk with Hitoshi? Izuku's tone with his meow or his face gave his question away and Toshinori put Izuku down on the floor. Yoichi told me everything. I know you and the Namu are connected as are you and Hitoshi. It's the main reason I requested Hitoshi as an intern. I also know that you are Izuku Midoriya. And that's why you hate me. Toshinori got down on his knees so he was at least at less of a threatening height. Now, as much as I want to talk to you more, I have a feeling we're on a time crunch, so please, call Hitoshi up. Shouta knew exactly how he wanted his internship with Bakugo to go. It was a little uncouth for pros to immediately take the interns on patrols. Usually patrols were reserved for the end of an internship after their interns have been trained to the ins and outs of hero works. However, Shouta's internship with Bakugo was going to be a wake-up call. While Bakugo has gotten better about his attitude, it's clear that he just needs a little nudge for it to finally hit home. The two of them ran through the alleyways expertly. Bakugo clearly found it hard to catch up with the elder hero, naturally, but he was keeping a decent pace which impressed Shouta. Because it was Shouta Aizawa, the patrol was for nighttime. The sun had already set and Musutafu's seedy underbelly was crawling about like bugs. The shift wouldn't end until the sun rose at 7 in the morning. He hoped Bakugo got plenty of rest. Help me. Let go, somebody help. The cry for help caused Shouta to run immediately towards the voice. He had to race down the alley until he found where the voice was coming from. There, against a building, a man was pinning a woman. He had her hands up her shirt and Shouta reacted with lightning-quick reflexes. He whipped his scarf around the assailant's neck and yanked the man towards him. By the time the assailant realized just what was happening, it was already too late. Shouta's boot landed squarely on the bastard's face and the man went flying. Shouta didn't even break a sweat as he landed expertly on his feet. How about you try that with me? He demanded of the lowlife. The man groaned in pain and he staggered to his feet. A hero. The assailant grunted and he pulled out a knife. Figures. It's always a little pocket knife. I'll cut you into pieces. Bakugo came from the other side of the alleyway and kicked the man right in the neck with his heavy boot. I don't think so. He raised his arm up at the man and popped a loud and bright explosion to stun the man. It worked and down the man went onto his ass, frozen in a stunned state. Ha, too easy. Bakugo grinned and looked back at his teacher, expecting to be praised. No praise was to be had. While your stealth was impressive, you still took too long going all the way around to the other end of the alley. The man had a weapon and he could have used that against his victim. In a moment's notice, you need to be fast. Take too long and you may be dealing with a body instead of a victim. You also failed to put the victim into consideration of your stun attack, Shouta explained bluntly after he cuffed the bastard. He then walked up to the woman who was huddled in a ball next to the alley wall. She had her hands over her ears and was shaking violently. Asia, he whispered to the woman and tried to ease her out of her scared ball without touching her. It's okay, we're heroes, he told the woman in a gentle tone, and slowly she uncurled herself from. The police are on their way. Go good, she whimpered. He just grabbed me. You're safe now, Shouta reassured her, and when she reached out for him he took her hand in his and cautiously helped her to her feet. She was still trembling and refused to let go of his hand. Not until the police would come. Once statements were made and the guy was hauled off, it was back to work the two of them went. Bakugo hummed as they went back to running through the alleyways of Musutafu together. Something on your mind? Shouta inquired. No, well, maybe. I don't understand what you meant back there when you told me I didn't put that woman into consideration. Of course I did. Otherwise I wouldn't have saved her. Shouta slowed his running down. He didn't stop, just slowed so he and Bakugo were at matching speedings and communication was easier. But you didn't. He spoke loud and clear, making Bakugo hang on every word. You used a loud and bright attack. Yes, it stunned the assailant, but it also terrified the woman. A woman who had just been assaulted and was still in harm's way. Your quirk is a good quirk to have. It's useful and powerful, yes, but it's also loud and flashy. You need to think about the situation you're in and determine whether or not you should use such a quirk. During a big battle against a villain? Yes, in a dark alleyway where a woman is already scared out of her wits and versus a man with a pocket knife. No, Bakugo's eyes went down as he thought about what was just said to him. I guess I never really thought about that. Shouta sped back up to give him time to think. They continued to jump from different alleyways and all around the city when something caught Shouta's eye. Jumper, he realized as he saw the outline of a person on a 5-story apartment complex roof less than a block away. Jumper, he called to Bakugo. Jump. Shouta didn't let him finish as he was already going as fast as he could towards the person. He wrapped his scarf around a light pole to hoist himself up, and soon he was on a different rooftop of the jumper. He then charged as fast as he could towards the apartment complex. He heard explosions and saw Bakugo fly up using his explosions to propel himself forward at an impressive speed. Still, it was Shouta that landed on the roof before Bakugo could. Don't do it, he panted to the person. A girl no older than 15, maybe 16. The shoes on her feet told Shouta enough about her. Those god-ugly shoes. Her hair, an inkai black, was in a long ponytail down her mid-back. She had the base of the ponytail in one hand and a pair of scissors in another. Her clothes, a school uniform older as high school uniform, was rumpled, dirtied, and even torn in places. She had bruises and burns all along her body. Her eyes, gray, were full of angry tears. Stay away from me, she demanded. You can't stop me, and she took a step towards the ledge. It's better this way. No, it's not. Shouta had both hands out in front of him so no weapon could be seen, and he even lifted his goggles up on the top of his head. You don't have to do this. There are programs. To hell with your programs, she screamed at him, and tears just flowed out of her desperate and scared eyes. I'm so fucking tired. I'm tired of fighting for my life day in and day out. I'm tired of being something I'm not. I'll never be anything. Not in this world. So she took another step back towards the ledge and she smiled. The smile was forced as tears continued to pour out of her eyes. I'll be happier in a new world. And she cut her ponytail with a resounding snip of the scissors just before she threw her arms out. That's bullshit, Bakugo called out to her from the other roof not too far from their own. And you know it. There's no reason for you to give up. Yeah, people suck ass. The best thing for you to do is to survive. Not feed into their bullcrap. Survive and be happy. The girl visibly winced at his words. Why? Why should I give them satisfaction? Why do I have to be the one who fights harder than the rest to prove a point? She all but screamed at him in her anger. It's not fair. Her words echoed around them and almost seemed to quiet the city. Shouta grabbed his scarf and got ready to yank her back from the ledge. Please. Bakugo's voice changed and Shouta realized that Bakugo was looking directly at him. I can do this, he insisted quietly. Shouta looked at him and then at her. He never took his hands off of his weapon, but he nodded, allowing Bakugo his first attempt at talking someone down from a ledge. Still, he had his weapon in his hands in case Bakugo failed. Look, Bakugo started in a firm voice. It sucks. I know it sucks. I know it's not fair. But there are people out there who genuinely love you and will be sad if you die. Nobody will miss me. Nobody. She sobbed weakly. You think that, but I know that's not true. Someone out there will be sad and mourn your death. Be it a friend or family. Someone out there loves you. Do you have any pets? What? Pets? Do you have any? I have a fish. Suki, she whispered. A little goldfish with a black right fin. Suki will miss you. Bakugo told her in an almost matter-of-fact tone. Not only that, but who will feed Suki when you're dead? Not your parents. They'll be too busy grieving you. The girl's lips wobbled. She sucked in a deep breath and steeled herself. It's not going to work. Stop playing your stupid mind games on me and just let me die in peace. Isn't there something you always wanted to do? Bakugo asked her before she could make a move. Your life isn't fulfilled, and you can't give up. You just can't. Why do you care? You don't know me. Because I lost someone to suicide. I have to live with that guilt every day of my life. He barked at her. The guilt of knowing that he's never coming back. That he's gone forever. And you know what else? I live with his mother who cries herself to sleep every night over the loss of her child. I don't want anybody to go through the pain I'm going through. It's not worth it. It's not. Are you prepared for the pain and heartbreak you're about to cause someone? The sleepless nights, or even them thinking suicide is the only answer because they miss you that much. If not, then please step back from the ledge and let us take you home. There was silence, and the girl just broke out into a series of hiccuping sobs. She collapsed to her knees and covered her face with her hands, one hand still holding onto the scissors. Bakugo's shoulders untensed and Shouter rushed to the girl. He grabbed her scissors and just chucked them away. It's okay, he whispered. We're going to get you help. He reassured her and she just shook her head. I want to go home, she whined to him. No hospitals. Please, no hospitals. Her shoulders shook with her sobs. Okay, Shouter promised her. No hospitals. Come on. He helped her up to her feet. She staggered for a moment but did correct herself while still sobbing softly. Why don't you? Shouter started to ask, why don't you show us where you live? But he never got that far. There was this unholy screech, and in a flash Bakugo was picked up off of the rooftop he was once on. A creature had Bakugo in its claws and was flying away at a high speed. Bakugo, Shouter yelled. Focus on the girl. Bakugo roared back to him. Leave this monster to me. And even from how far Bakugo was, Shouter could see the smile creep up on the boy's face before he set off an explosion. This is what Bakugo was waiting on. This is what he needed, something to take his anger out on, and the thing was the perfect target. When this thing grabbed him, Bakugo wasted no time using his quirk to his advantage. The explosion was big enough and loud enough to make the creature release him. Once released, Bakugo flipped once through the air before he corrected himself and used his explosions to fly forwards towards the stunned beast. Let's go, he screamed out, almost in delight as he popped several fiery explosions against the winged beast. I needed some for a relief today, and you're just what the doctor ordered. He then raised just his right hand at the beast that was more than stunned. It was burnt and injured in various parts of its body. He then released the pin on his grenade gauntlet. The explosion was massive, and several buildings had to have felt the shockwave. He knew cars did by the sound of various car alarms now going off. Down the creature went, and Bakugo landed safely beside it. Heh. He rubbed at his nose with his thumb triumphantly. Who else wants some of me? He called out to the darkness of the night, not really expecting an answer. But he got one. A loud high-pitched trill that reminded him of a bird. It sounded like it was behind him. So, Bakugo turned and immediately took several alarming steps back. His body actually started to shake. There was this creature that emerged from the darkness. This creature was massive as it towered over Bakugo's stature. It was a dark midnight color all over its body. They could say for a pair of giant beige shorts. It had cuts all over its upper arms and torso, but the thing that really stuck out about it had a beak and an exposed brain. The brain took up most of its head with its eyes, beady and almost lifeless, empty soulless eyes staring into Bakugo's soul. Oh, and it wasn't alone. Sitting on its shoulder was the not Deku. Not Deku, no, Bakugo needed a better name. Nai's was a better name for this thing. A fake, as he wasn't the real Deku. Nai's had his legs crossed as was staring down at Bakugo as he sat on this monster's shoulders. It's been some time, Kakin. You didn't think I forgot about you, did you? Nai's asked with a sickly grin across his features. Oh, Tsubasa, what a shame. The grin never left his mouth as he stared down at the charred remains of the winged creature still smoldering. Basa. Bakugo whispered, and slowly, oh so slowly, he turned towards the creatures, towards the wings this creature had. You remember Tsubasa, don't you, Kakin? How he would pick me up just to see how high he could drop me to the ground before it caused serious damage. Wasn't that your idea? Tsubasa went missing when we were in middle school. Well, he's dead now. Good going. Nai shrugged in a lackadaisical manner. Bakugo turned towards Nai's and the thing that was holding him. Your lies aren't going to get to me, he snarled. Nai's kept that stupid smile. He then patted the creature's face before just reaching out and grasping the bottom of his beak like he was showing off a dog. Isn't my new friend cute? His name is Namu and he's strong. I believe you said that you're the strongest there is. Wanna test that? Nice's green eyes lit up with a sadistic joy as he grinned. Namu here would love to test out his quirks on you, Kaken. Bakugo raised his left gauntlet up. Fine. And without another word he pulled the pin out. The blast was just as loud, if not louder, than the last. The shockwave did more than just shake the cars as he witnessed several buildings lose their windows from such a blast. Heh, let's see you live through. Bakugo's grin dissipated as Nama was completely and utterly unscathed. In fact, the beast was holding Nai's in its massive arms and had its body protect Nai's. Any wounds were quickly repaired on the spot. That was a nice try, Kaken. Nai's was placed on the ground. He looked so small, tiny, and frail compared to the behemoth next to him. A real nice try, but it's going to take more than that. Get rid of me. Nai's paused for a second before turning away from Bakugo with a startled gasp. Namu, the beast was just in time. With speed that should be impossible, Namu grabbed onto Nai's and pulled him in close once again, and it was none too soon as a large knife lodged itself into Namu's shoulder. How vile of you! A man emerged from the darkness. He had wispy black hair put up in a ponytail to keep out of his face. He wore a white mask around his eyes, and he was armed to the teeth with knives. His mouth was twisted in a frown. From what Bakugo could see, no nose was to be had, but what he didn't have in a nose he had in a tongue. We should at least make this match fair. Nai's narrowed his eyes at this man. This doesn't concern you. But it does. This man grabbed a sword off of his back and pointed it at Nai's. Not only will I not allow you to kill a child, but I know exactly who and what you are and who you run around with. And just who are you? Nai's demanded, his mouth forming a snarl that just looked unnatural on Izuku. You may just refer to me as Stain. Stain doesn't sound very heroic. I am no hero, nor am I a villain. Though, I wasn't aware that was something someone could do. Nai's smiled that damned smile as he pulled away from his Namu. Bakugo tensed and got ready to fight. I should warn you, Stain, if it's a battle you wish for. He stood in front of the alley and Bakugo shuddered when two yellow eyes made themselves known and orange mist spilled out into the street. I don't exactly do fair. Tamura Shigaraki stepped out of an orange portal only to be followed by Kurogiri. The two of them stood beside Nai's and Namu. Despite the hand covering most of Tamura's face, Bakugo could see him grinning before he charged straight for Bakugo. Let's have some fun. True to his word, Nai's did not play fair. While that vigilante Stain, he said his name was, went after Namu. Bakugo wanted to help the man. There's no way one person can take on a behemoth of that size, but he found himself in a 3-on-1. Bakugo jumped to the side to avoid Shigaraki's hand coming straight for his face. Get out of my face. He could only roar back at the crusty man before shooting him back with an explosion. The man fell back onto the pavement from the blow. Bakugo hardly had enough time to dodge a knife coming for his face. Nai's was cackling. His face split into a horrifying grin as the knife nicked just under Bakugo's right eye. Bakugo gritted his teeth and pulled his arm back before he punched Nai's right in the face. Nai's fell onto his back with a startled cry of alarm. Did you think I wasn't going to attack you back? Bakugo didn't get to finish his sentence when suddenly the floor below him was taken out from under him. He didn't even get to scream when the violently orange portal squeezed around his midsection so tightly that it cut off Bakugo's oxygen almost immediately. Now, that wasn't very nice, Nai's whispered as he rose back to his feet. He touched his nose. Where Bakugo knew he hit him, his nose looked fine. Not a spot of blood to be seen. It wasn't even crooked. Kurogiri, keep him still for me. Get. Bakugo's chest refused to expand and his breath was stolen out of his lungs as the portal guy gave him a squeeze. Nai's walked up and pressed the tip of his knife against Bakugo's jugular. Bakugo felt himself sweat as the lack of oxygen was actually causing his veins to pop out more prominently. All it would take was one well-placed cut and he was dead. There was a sudden shriek from the monster that took Nai's attention off of Bakugo. Namu was on the ground and screaming. A knife lodged into its eyeball. Blood was spurting from the wound like a fountain. Stain was nowhere to be seen. At first, in a flash a knife flew through the air and lodged itself right into Nai's shoulder blade. Nai's let out a grunt and leaned down on himself out of instinct. Bakugo could see the knife poking out of the shoulder, but it was only for just a second before it was yanked out. Then Nai's fell down like a ragdoll. What did you do? Nai's cried from his spot on the floor. Stain stood over Nai's, the bloody knife up to his mouth as he licked the blood. Nai's gave a little smirk as he looked at Stain. You're a person with a blood quirk as well. The quirk that you have is not yours. Stain growled and Nai's smirked. You know a lot. Have you been spying on us? Stain placed both of his feet on either side of Nai's hips and turned the blade downward towards Nai's exposed pulsating brain. More than that. Don't worry, your suffering will end soon enough. Yes, please, Bakugo thought as he watched with limited breath. You really think it's going to be that easy? Did you forget? There are 4 of us. Nai's was grinning from his spot on the floor and Stain turned just in time to avoid getting stabbed with his own knife. Shigaraki cackled. He then reached up with his free hand to smack Stain with all 5 fingers in order to decay his face. But Stain was quicker and managed to dodge out of the way just in the nick of time. The two of them swiftly started a fight with Stain dodging any and all of Shigaraki's attacks, but with Shigaraki getting more and more intense as the fight continued on. He cackled and was swinging almost blindly. Bakugo squirmed against the portal guy and felt for the pin on his other gauntlet. The portal guy was too focused on Shigaraki to notice Bakugo. Then he managed to grab the pin with his hand and knew what he needed to do. Let go. Bakugo all but screamed and set off the massive explosion inside of the portal. Bakugo was thrown as the portal guy screamed. Landing on his feet, like a cat, Bakugo grunted and slid across the ground. He then charged at Kurogiri. Die! He roared and set off several explosions towards the villain. Is it the best you have? Kurogiri grunted and a portal was opened protecting the man from Bakugo's attack. You want more? I can give you more, Bakugo gasped when he felt something sink into his back right between his shoulders. Knives was cackling from behind Bakugo before he yanked the knife right out. Bakugo grunted before he dropped to his knees in pain. It was the worst pain he ever felt and he tried to stifle his scream of pain, but it came out an elongated grunt. Hey Stain. Knives turned towards the vigilante and held the knife up to his lips. Let me show you what I can do. Then, Knives, like Stain, put the flat side of the knife down against his tongue and dragged it down. Bakugo's blood stained his tongue before he shut his mouth and swallowed the coppery-tasting blood down. Then, he started to morph in shape, his whole body twisting and conforming until he was suddenly a perfect replica of Bakugo. Bakugo felt fear when he was looking back at his own malicious face, his own sinister red eyes. He went to stand. He was suddenly grabbed from around the middle by Kurogiri again. I like your costume design, Kaken. The bastard's voice even sounded like him. I like all the exposed skin, Kurogiri. Hold him. I think it's time for some payback. Before he knew it, he felt pain explode against his right shoulder as one of his own explosions popped off. Bakugo let out a yelp of pain and shock. It hurt. It hurt like hell. His yell was cut off when he felt Knives put his entire palm on his left shoulder. Don't you? The heat came fast and hard. From 0 to 100 as he felt the heat melt away at his flesh, slowly causing his flesh to blister and pop. He could smell his own flesh start to cook and Bakugo could feel Knives' demonic grin. He tried to keep his mouth shut, to not give Knives the satisfaction, but pain became too much and he let out a scream as he tried to thrash and get away, but Kurogiri was doing a damn good job at keeping him still. How does it feel, Kaken? I have to admit, from where I'm standing, it feels pretty great to not be on the receiving end of this. Not like before where you and your friends would hold me down and do the same to me. Knives let out a scream of joy only to be followed by another series of cackles. Bakugo didn't have a comeback. He couldn't even use his hands to defend himself as Kurogiri had secured him in such a way that his hands and legs were in the portal while his upper body was defenseless and exposed. Hold him down. It was a chant from wild middle schoolers as a group of them, some faceless nobodies to Bakugo, dog-piled on Midoriya. Midoriya screamed and tried to get away, to kick his way out, to scramble to the safety of the school building. But they had caught him first. Kaken, please, don't do this, Midoriya had cried, tears in those big green eyes as he struggled against the bullies who had his arms and legs pinned so he couldn't escape. Please, Bakugo grinned as he felt his hand warm up. Don't worry, it'll be quick. I'm sure you won't even feel a thing. Bakugo gritted his teeth when Knives finally removed his hand. The spot was throbbing and was hot even once the hand was removed. Now, there's still 2 little scars then I'd like ... Let's see. How about right here? Knives' hand grasped the very back of Bakugo's neck. No, he whispered. The pain would be excruciating there. It could even make him pass out, which would be a death sentence. I can't hear you, Kaken. Knives' voice turned sickly sweet as he added a bit more pressure on the back of Bakugo's neck. Are you asking me to stop? Bakugo's pride told him to tell Knives to go screw himself. But he instead bit his lip and decided to try and appease this creature. Please, I'm sorry. Oh, that was not a nice oh. It was an oh full of anger and contempt. You're sorry. You're sorry. The big bad Katsuki Bakugo is sorry. How pathetic. He felt heat build on the back of his neck and flinched, getting ready for the pain. There was a yowl followed by a yelp. He watched as Knives crashed to the ground with a familiar green cat clawing at his face. It lasted for 2 seconds, maybe 3, before Moss took off running before Knives could get his hands on the cat. Bakugo, a capture weapon wrapped around Kurogiri's body. And the man was tossed to the side by Hitoshi. Hitoshi dropped down from a light pole and went to kick at Kurogiri's body. Well, this caused the man to release Bakugo to make a portal to block Hitoshi's attack. Hitoshi was quick to actually flip back so he and Bakugo were side by side. That burn looks nasty. Forget it. Bakugo snarled and squatted down. We got company. Hitoshi turned to where Bakugo was looking and paled at the Namu that was now starting to rise. Where did Stain and Shigaraki go? Bakugo thought with narrowed eyes as he noticed that those two had vanished off in the distance. So, it was just them versus the 2 villains and a monstrous Namu. Knives suddenly took off running after Moss, who was gunning it for an alleyway. Nice didn't even look back towards them. With expert hands he used his explosions to lift off the ground and fly after the retreating moss. So, it was a 2-on-2 as both Kurogiri and Namu stared them down. Hitoshi's hands shook a little, but he was quick to squat down next to Bakugo. That Namu has an exposed brain. Hitoshi whispered to Bakugo. I bet you could fry it. Have you seen the size of that thing? Bakugo whispered back. I need an opening. While both boys looked at Kurogiri as the man was now staring at them with his cold, lifeless eyes. I'd rather not harm children. It would be in your best interest to back down. Especially you. Kurogiri motioned towards Hitoshi. Hitoshi grunted and grabbed onto his scarf a little tighter. I'm more than aware of that thing's feelings towards me, or who he thinks me to be. Nice. Bakugo grunted. I call him Nice because he's not Izuku. Hitoshi grunted. It fits him. I like that name for him. Regardless, Nice is not my friend. Why would he think he is? Bakugo asked, and Hitoshi just looked at him before shaking his head. I'm aware he has Deku's memories, but Deku never once met you. I would know if he had. There was a look on Hitoshi's face. It looked like he was looking down on Bakugo. Ignoring all of that, Hitoshi focused back around towards Kurogiri. Nice means nothing to me. What a shame. Kurogiri's voice was strangely sad as he said this. You mean the world to him. Kurogiri's bright eyes dulled as Hitoshi put him under with his own quirk. Right, I forgot you can do that. Bakugo grumbled. Both boys turned to look at the Namu that was just standing there. He hasn't moved. We should attack it now. Then he pulled out a knife from his person that made Bakugo give him a look. Why did he have a knife? They weren't allowed to have such weapons on them. Not until they were in their 3rd year. Hitoshi spoke too soon. The beast suddenly sprung into action and wrapped its massive arms around Hitoshi before pulling the teen into him. This caused Hitoshi to drop his previously mentioned weapon. Hey. Hitoshi let out a scream of alarm as he tried to pitifully kick his legs against Namu, but it was like watching a toothless dog bite someone. It did nothing. When Namu turned, then did Nice strike. Nice sliced Hitoshi's cheek wide open with the blade. Nice was back in his normal body, and like the USJ he was butt naked. But he wouldn't be for long. Forgive me, it was rude running off like that. That damn cat got away from me and my time limit ran out. Nice smiled as he looked at the blood that rested off of the tip of his knife. I just saw the perfect moment and I couldn't waste it. Now. Let's see if I like this body. Nice brought the knife to his lips and licked the blood off of it. Like before, his body twisted and morphed until he was a perfect replica of Hitoshi Shinsu. You know, Hitoshi, if you truly hate your quirk, I know a guy who can take it off your hands. Give you something a little more fitting of your talents. A nice floating quirk will do you good. Not this. Nice walked up to Hitoshi. What do you say? Hitoshi threw his head back and spat right into Nice's face. I would rather die. He responded. What a shame. But I will never hurt you. You don't know me. Do I need to repeat what I do know? You only know those things because of Moss. I have never met you. Bakugo sucked in a breath. What? Nice rose his nose up ever so slightly before sighing. Well, that cat and I are connected. It doesn't change my feelings towards you. Well, it should. Bakugo had more questions than answers, and he realized he was getting nowhere by just standing here like an idiot. Bakugo sparked his palms and then rushed at Nice. Die. I already have. Nice shouted back at him with a cackle, and Bakugo suddenly felt a capture weapon wrap around his wrist. And it's all because of you and All Might. Bakugo blinked. What? While it was true that Bakugo was there during the USJ, he wasn't all there. Nice had freaked him out so badly that he blocked out most, if not all, of what was being said between Nice and All Might. He just stopped listening. What did you just say? He asked again. Did you say All Might? I did. He told me to be realistic. And I did the most realistic thing I could think of. Nice growled as they were now inches from each other. And I have you to thank for that idea, don't I? Bakugo swallowed hard as he stared into Nice's intense eyes. Master Izuku, it's Tamura. He's been caught by the heroes. Nice gnashed his teeth together in rage and irritation. Go to him, Kurogiri. Namu and I can handle everything here. Nice instructed, and in the blink of an eye Kurogiri was gone. Bakugo popped an explosion off given the opportunity. And he burnt through the capture scarf with ease before he rushed and kicked Nice directly into the stomach, causing the boy to go flying back. Oof, was the noise Nice made as he rolled onto the ground. He corrected himself with ease. I expected better from you, Kaken. Then a voice from the heavens seemed to roar above all. What about me? All Might jumped down from a building and landed down with a force so hard that he cracked the pavement. He situated himself firmly between Bakugo and Nice. I expected nothing, and yet somehow I'm still disappointed. Nice growled and raised his knife up. I'm sorry you feel that way. Now you're sorry. Nice's eyes were cold as he just stared at All Might. Too little too late. The Namu, seemingly understanding Nice, dropped Hitoshi like he was nothing more than a sack of potatoes before rushing at All Might with a screech. All Might cocked his arm back. Smash! He roared, and the shockwave was massive, nearly causing Bakugo to go flying back. But not the creature. The Namu was still standing. Both Hitoshi and Bakugo looked at the thing in surprise. Nise walked up to the Namu. Namu grabbed Nise and hoisted the boy on his shoulder. Nise took his seat and grinned. "Do you like my pretty pet? All Might. He was made to be the anti-you." Nise's grin was sinister as he still shared Hitoshi's face and body. He then reached up and grasped Namu by its beak. He crossed one leg over the other and showed Namu off. "He has shock absorption, so he can take anything you throw at him. You see, I had a feeling you'd be here today. The little kitty probably ran to you, so we felt it better to bring Namu out to say hi." He whispered the last part with a grin across his face. "I see." All Might rolled his shoulders before he looked like he was preparing to lunge. The Namu let out a trilling noise and got down ready to fight with Nise still sitting pretty on its shoulder. Nise's eyes narrowed as he looked at Bakugo. "If I walk away from here with just one of you two on a slab, I will consider just that a win." Nise's voice was as cold as his stare as he looked from Bakugo and then All Might. "You call yourself Izuku Midoriya?" Hitoshi inquired, and it was like everything was still as Nise slowly turned his head to look at his friend. "Yes," Nise responded plainly like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I am Izuku Midoriya." Izuku Midoriya wouldn't say the things you say. Yes, he's angry, but he would never wish death on Bakugo or All Might. Says the one who just said he's never met me before. You can't say you've never met and then act like you know me. Hitoshi gritted his teeth. "Fine, I do know you. I know the real you. I know you like pork katsudon. I know when you were alive you loved to analyze any quirk you came into contact with because you were just so fascinated by them. I know that maybe, just maybe, if we would have met before you killed yourself we might have made good friends. But I also know that deep down you, the real you, is bitter at his death, but he would never wish for anyone to die for his own doing. Yes, they pushed you over the edge, but you still chose to jump off of that rooftop that day, and you know that, don't you, boss?" There was a green blur and suddenly Nise was, once again, thrown to the floor by an enraged Moss. Moss was yowling as he used everything he had to scratch at Nise's face. "Focus on the Namu, All Might," Hitoshi instructed before he grabbed his own capture weapon and shot it out to capture Nise. The weapon tightly ensnared around Nise and kept him on the floor tied with his hands bound by his side. Moss gave a hiss and stayed puffed up as he stared at Nise. Low growls that could almost be mistaken for speech left his mouth. He stood high on his toes while his tail curled in front of his hind legs. Bakugo looked at Moss with those eyes that always freaked him out. He listened to what Hitoshi had to say twice about the situation and his mind went back to that day in the cemetery. At class a few days ago where the cat had changed his hero name to TNT. Something he and Deku discussed when they were still friends. The day where that cat looked dead at him, and then at Izuku's previously vandalized grave when Bakugo had demanded to know just who this freaky cat was, and it all just clicked. Still, Bakugo kept his findings to himself for now. There was a noise followed by a gust of wind that caused Bakugo to go down on instinct to protect his head. When he shyly looked over to the Namu and All Might, he saw the two of them now going head to head, with All Might throwing punch after punch to try and knock the beast down. Nise growled from his spot on the floor. "I am Izuku Midoriya," he argued against Hitoshi. "I'm not buying it," Hitoshi said firmly, and Bakugo stepped up to Nise and Hitoshi. He then raised his hand up and shot an explosion in the faker's face. This caused Nise to turn away from reflex. "Shut your trap," Bakugo roared. Then he brought his boot up and kicked Nise in the face. "I am so fucking tired of hearing your voice. That hurt," Nise hissed between clenched teeth as he looked at Bakugo with hatred and a desire to see Bakugo Katsuki burn. The whole area seemed to shake as All Might and the giant beast continued to go at it in the back with punches strong enough to throw all of them off of their feet if they weren't braced for it. "Then shut your mouth," Bakugo didn't get to finish. A knife flew past him and Hitoshi and landed directly against Nise's shoulder. "All Might, it's been a while." Stain was back and he jumped down from a nearby rooftop. "I apologize for the delay. That blue-haired one gave me a chase." Stain, All Might dodged a punch being thrown his way from the Namu and was swift to retaliate with his own punch, which did nothing as the shock absorption this creature had did a damn good job. "What are you doing here? I've been watching for a certain someone to make moves again." And it seems Stain took out a katana that's been cut and jacked to ensure more blood flow would happen. "No clean cuts." He pointed the katana directly at Nise. "He has, but don't worry, that thing won't live past tonight." Nise blinked slowly. "I see. Clearly I underestimated a lot of factors." He breathed before his face turned vicious. "I won't fall to the likes of you, Kurogiri." Hitoshi and Bakugo had to jump back when an orange portal nearly swallowed them both down with Nise. "Keep an eye on that cat of yours, Hitoshi. This will be the last time I willingly let him escape my grasp," Nise yelled before he was gone. The Namu gave a screech before it too was taken away by a portal. Taken to be used again another day, it seemed. This just left them standing around in shock. Moss jumped up to Hitoshi's shoulders and looked at Bakugo. "Here, that looks nasty." Hitoshi reached into his utility belt and pulled out some medication. "It's just some burn cream." He smeared the greasy substance on his hand and warmed it up with his fingers before he approached Bakugo. Bakugo pulled away. I don't need you looking down on me, he growled at Hitoshi. I'm not. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow. I'm helping, Bakugo snorted. Whatever. He did flinch when the stuff made contact with the first wound, the handprint on his shoulder. Ouch, Hitoshi commented. It's whatever. I've faced worse. And why do I find that hard to believe? Ask your cat. Hitoshi hummed before pulling out some gauze. You're an interesting person, Bakugo Katsuki. Is that an insult? Not at all. Arm up. Hitoshi gently tapped Bakugo's left arm and Bakugo responded by lifting his arm up to allow Hitoshi to loosely wrap the wound in the gauze. There, he taped the gauze off. It's just a placehold so I would get it looked at as I'm not a medical professional. Hitoshi put the gauze and burn cream away before he leaned down and picked up that knife that he had earlier. Hey, you know you're not supposed to have that, right? Bakugo asked him as Hitoshi put the knife into his boot. Hitoshi put a finger to his lips and smiled. Where'd you even get that? Oh god, don't tell me it's Aizawa's. I'm not that dumb. I got it at the USJ. Some guy attacked me with it and, well, finders keepers. Hitoshi shrugged. Bakugo, speaking of Aizawa. The man came flying down from a building top with the grace and elegance of a cat. I'm sorry, are you hurt? He asked as he quickly gave Bakugo a once-over. He was breathing heavily while twisting Bakugo around to look at his injured shoulder. He peeled the gauze back and visibly grimaced. I'm fine. Yeah, no, we need to get to the hospital with that wound. That's at least a 2nd degree, maybe even a 3rd degree. I apologize you had to endure that. Aizawa turned Bakugo around to face him. I tried to get here as fast as I could but I saw Shigaraki fighting with someone I had to jump in. But you caught him right? Hitoshi asked and Aizawa gave his head a shake. We did have him in cuffs, but a portal opened from under him and he was out of our grasp. Damn, Aizawa. All Might was quick to jog up to the man. Bakugo looked past All Might in disdain. The man was climbing up to the rooftop and Bakugo tilted his head as he watched the man look out at the city before vanishing into the night. Vigilantism is illegal but ... It seems this man has All Might in his pocket. Bakugo mused as he looked over at All Might who was talking quickly with Aizawa. Aizawa beckoned for his child. What's in your boot? All Might wasn't above telling on his little mentee it seemed. It was more than enough to make Bakugo smile as Hitoshi shyly ducked his head. Give it. Aizawa held his palm flat and Hitoshi was forced to surrender his weapon. It made Aizawa whistle. That's easily 12 inches. He touched the tip of the blade with his finger causing it to bleed. We'll discuss this when you return home. The sound of sirens permeated the air making them all turn as flashing lights came closer. I think that's our cue to get going. All Might came up and put his hands on Hitoshi's shoulders. You did good, young Shinsu. Thank you. Hitoshi didn't seem too bitter about the loss of this knife that he never even got to use. Young Bakugo. Is what Nais said true? Bakugo had to know. He just had to. Nais, the fake Izuku. Is what he said true? Are you also the cause for Izuku's suicide? Did you tell him to? To be realistic. Bakugo's voice dropped low as he looked away from his own personal hero. All Might looked at him before sighing. That's not something we should discuss now. Get some rest, the man said and then turned to lead Hitoshi away. Moss looked back at Bakugo and Bakugo stared at the cat, at those green eyes, before he saw Moss nod before lying lazily across Hitoshi's shoulders. Bakugo Katsuki had a lot to think about after tonight. Not bad for the first day of internships, huh? Shouta asked as he sat in the back of the ambulance with Bakugo. Certainly not what I expected. The next few days of internships were really a blur for Hitoshi and Moss alike. Hitoshi finished up training with All Might's personal teacher and All Might was able to get that feel of Hitoshi that he wanted at the start when the two of them went one-on-one. It was completely quirkless, no powers involved. Hitoshi still had no chance, even with Moss secretly giving him advice on where to go and what to hit. Hitoshi tried to even go for the wound in one last desperate attempt at winning. But All Might wasn't the best hero for nothing and knew to block that area off. I take it Moss told you about that wound. Nice try. And then Hitoshi had a glorious taste of the dojo mat as All Might laid his ass out. Ugh, he half-whined as he stood. God, you're good. Of course. But don't worry, you'll get there, young Hitoshi. All Might encouraged him with that smile still on his face. Still, your stats are good but I'd like them to be the best they can possibly be. You can lift upwards of 150. Not bad. I would raise the cap just a smidge. He made a motion with his fingers like he had a small gap he wanted to fill in. Hitoshi dusted himself off and stretched his arms and shoulders out. Sure, how much do you want me to lift? I need to work on my deadlifting anyways. Ideally, of course, about 550 more pounds. Hitoshi's head never whipped around faster to stare at the man like he's just grown a second head. I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you right. Did you just say you want me to lift upwards of 600 pounds, ideally? Yes, and I believe you can do it. All Might slapped Hitoshi on the shoulder and Hitoshi just looked at him. What a crock of shit. Izuku snorted from where he's been quietly sitting. Hitoshi then rubbed the inside of his cheek with his tongue and then looked over at Izuku before looking back at All Might. You don't think me learning how to lift 600 pounds is a bit excessive? Not at all. Why, some of our other classmates, like young Bakugo or young Shoji, can lift as such. All Might waggled his giant finger at Hitoshi. Yeah, Bakugo is a show-off and Shoji is built like a brick house. I'm leaning more towards stealth and swiftness. I already know that I need to lift at least 200 pounds, but 600. I can't be quiet and stealthy with the body of a bodybuilder, so what's this all really about? All Might? Hitoshi finally asked and looked All Might dead in his blue eyes. All Might gave a chuckle. You catch on fast. He then reached up and ruffled Hitoshi's locks. You don't have to have the body of a bodybuilder. I'm sure with the right diet and exercise you can keep your physique relatively the same. All Might Hitoshi grabbed All Might's hand with both of his to stop the man from continuing his assault on Hitoshi's hair. You're skirting around my question. He called the hero out. Izuku trotted up to the duo and jumped onto Hitoshi's shoulder where he would sit vigilant. His green eyes gave nothing away as he stared All Might dead on, and that made the man sweat a little, it would seem. I need to do a little more thinking before I tell you the full truth, young Hitoshi. All Might finally confessed, and it left Hitoshi and Izuku both with more questions than answers when they watched the man retreat into the elevator and out of sight. What an odd man. Hitoshi sighed once it was just him and Moss. You're telling me? Izuku shook his head. He wants something from you, but for it seems whatever it is must require you to lift up to 600 pounds, which is insane. Might I add, do you know how long it'll take me to lift that much? Papa even said he didn't want me lifting too much as extreme bodybuilding can cause chronic pain in the muscles, nerves, and joints. Hitoshi almost wanted to scoff. Izuku gave a hum as he seemed to think about it. It's hard to say. I think if we bide our time we'll get the answer. Yeah. Hitoshi rubbed a hand against his neck. The elevator suddenly dinged loudly, making both of them turn towards it. Who to step out but Hawks of all heroes with Takoyami directly behind him. Hawks looked around before his shoulders gave a noticeable slump. Looking for All Might? Hitoshi asked as he approached the two. Yeah, we were told he was here. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Hawks rubbed at the back of his neck a little awkwardly as he smiled at Hitoshi. He just left. I'm willing to bet he's in his office on the top floor. Hitoshi offered and Hawks smiled. Thanks, Tsukayomi. Why don't you stay with your friend? Hitoshi watched as Hawks' eyebrows rose up and down suggestively and Takoyami covered his face with his hands. I shouldn't be long. Hawks then returned to the elevator and left. This left Hitoshi and Takoyami. So, All Might was your secret internship offer? Takoyami inquired when the silence became just a little too heavy between the duo. Hitoshi nodded. Yeah, he wanted me to keep it mostly quiet due to people thinking nepotism is involved. Makes sense. The silence returned and Takoyami, once again, broke the silence. I heard that on your first day you got to fight villains. Yeah, Hitoshi leaned against a wall and Takoyami followed suit. The same villains from the USJ, in fact. It was crazy. They were after Bakugo and we thankfully managed to get to him in time. Though, there was also this vigilante. He was actually pretty cool. Not that I got to talk to him or anything. As soon as he was there he was gone. Is Bakugo alright? Hitoshi shrugged. I mean physically. He suffered a couple of nasty burns. I don't know if he'll be okay in the head after this. That boy, I think it's getting to him. Hitoshi spoke honestly with a headshake. To be fair, if the corpse of my old victim came back to haunt me, I don't think I'd be taking it well mentally either. Hitoshi quickly looked around the dojo. Once the coast was clear he put his finger to his lips. I got a souvenir from the fight, wanna see? But you can't tell. Sure. Hitoshi leaned down to his boot and pulled out a blade. A dagger in all actuality. The vigilante left this behind and it was just so cool. Ooh. Takoyami reached for it, paused, and then looked at Hitoshi. May I? Of course. Takoyami looked at it and inspected it from its length to its metal. This is heavy duty. Whoever that vigilante is wanted to cause some heavy bleeding damage. This is a 12-inch blade with the tips refined to a point. He ran his thumb over the tip of the blade and a cut instantly formed. If I had to guess I would say that this is made with carbon steel. It's sturdy and it's hard to chip or break. Hitoshi leaned down and looked at the dagger. You know a bit about daggers, don't you? He smiled and it made Takoyami blush a little. I happen to have a sword. Plus it helps that mother really loves blacksmithing and even likes to smith weapons for heroes. He coughed and looked away from Hitoshi and Moss, who were both looking at him with excited stares. He then quickly handed the dagger back to Hitoshi, who took it and put it right back in his boot. I could. Takoyami finished his sentence in a whisper and Hitoshi looked at him, the excitement never once leaving his face. Did you say what I think you said? Takoyami cleared his throat loudly. I could help train you on how to train with such a weapon. If you'd like. I don't have a sword just for show, you know. He tried again, his face and even beak tinging with pink. I'd love to. After internships, of course, and, we have to keep this quiet. My parents don't exactly like the idea of me training with sharp weapons. Takoyami nodded. Understandable. Something caught his eye out the window, and he rushed to it in a hurry. Damn it, he cried when both he and Hitoshi watched as hawks flew from the window. I have to go. Then Takoyami didn't even bother with the elevator as he rushed down the emergency stairs. Hitoshi only tilted his head as he watched Takoyami's retreating form. How bizarre. He then looked at Izuku, who just shrugged. All Might, still buffed up, came out of the elevator moments later. All right, young Hitoshi, it's time for the next part of your internship. Hitoshi turned excitedly, so excitedly that he nearly knocked Izuku off of his shoulder. Patrols. No, it's even better and more crucial. Community service. Then, before Hitoshi could even attempt to protest, something Toshinori likely picked up on, he was grabbed and they were suddenly out the window. A scream ripped from Hitoshi's throat and a yowl from Moss's as they were in the air and quickly flying through it at Mach 1. Hitoshi didn't flail as much as he wanted to. He latched himself onto All Might's neck with one hand and made sure to keep Moss tight against his chest with his other hand. As soon as it happened, it was over and they were in front of Takoba Beach. The trash beach, or as some citizens of Musutafu like to call it, Dagaba Beach. It was just polluted with trash from people using it as a dump site for the past decades. It's a wretched sight, isn't it? All Might placed Hitoshi down. Hitoshi's whole body swayed from side to side before he backed up several steps and then collapsed to his knee. What the fuck? He whispered fearfully. Warn a guy before you do something like that. His whole face was white and not even his pupils could be seen, as he was sure at one point during that flight he felt his soul leave his body. Moss wasn't much better. It wouldn't surprise Hitoshi if he died from fright during that whole ordeal. Yes, a wretched sight indeed. All Might continued on like nothing happened. Which is why, as your mentor, I've decided you're going to get the place clean. Obviously, you can't do much in a week, but if you take some time out of your schedule every day for a week for 4 hours, I'm sure we can make good progress. He then turned and pointed dramatically at Hitoshi. What do you say? Hitoshi shook his head violently to rightfully return his soul into his body, and then looked at All Might. You're joking, right? Hitoshi asked once he looked out at the landfill that was once a beautiful beach. Like you're honest to God joking. How much free time do you think I have? He inquired. Well, it's just that you're a teen. All Might, I'm hero training. I train with all 3 of my dads every week, multiple times a week. I have ballet practice on the weekend. I have school during the week, and that's not even counting the training and battle practice I do at school. The time I have to clean a beach is very limited, and you want me to do it once a week for 4 hours. Community service is fine, but this is overkill. Hitoshi gasped and Moss piped up. Look at the trash. These are all heavy objects. It has to do with your less than ideal weight training. Izuku's tail lashed out as he stared right at All Might, unblinking. All Might started to squirm under both of their gazes. All Might, what is this about? Really, why can't you just tell me? Hitoshi asked with a sigh. Why do you need me to be stronger? And why are you trying to hide weight training under the guise of community service? All Might clammed up before turning away from Hitoshi with a heavy sigh of his own. You're smart, young Hitoshi. And same to you, young Izuku. Hitoshi looked at Izuku. He knows. I didn't tell him. Remember my uncle, the white-haired guy? Hitoshi asked in his head, and Izuku nodded. He has connections with Toshinori, but I don't know why. Toshinori knows that you, myself, and that Namu are all connected mentally. How strange. Hitoshi whispered and then looked at Toshinori. Well, what's this all about? He demanded in a mildly snappy tone. Why do you want me to be able to lift over half a ton? Why am I not strong enough for you? Toshinori deflated right there into his skinny form. Surprise. I already knew. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Toshinori snorted. Young Hitoshi, I guess I should just come out and say it. The Vestiges themselves are interested in you. They want you to be my next successor. Hitoshi and Izuku shared a look with each other before looking back at Toshinori. Vestiges, the previous holders of One for All. He dramatically called out to Hitoshi and then offered his hand for the boy to take. A stockpile quirk that can be passed down from holder to holder. It can make you and your own quirk stronger than ever. It's the mother of all quirks. Both Izuku and Hitoshi looked at Toshinori's grand speech on the quirk before they stared at one another. Then, Izuku shook his head. I have nothing, in all honesty. But the issue is, I can't pass it down to you in your current state. You need to be stronger in order to inherit my quirk. Have you talked to my dads about this? Hitoshi cut Toshinori off suddenly. No, they can't know. Hitoshi then turned his heel and started to walk. No, he stated firmly. If they can't know, and can't put their honest opinions in on this whole ordeal, then my answer is a firm no. Young Hitoshi, they really can't know about this. If word gets out to the wrong person, so my dads are all wrong people now. No, they're heroes, All Might. Oboro is the number 8 most popular hero, while Aizawa works with you, and so does Present Mike. You know them all and you can't trust them enough to tell them this, or ... Is it more malicious than that? Hitoshi's voice turned deep as he glared at his mentor. Are you hoping that I'd accept under the guise of this being our little secret? Which is creepy. Toshinori quickly waved his hands around. No, nothing like that. I just ... This quirk is a big deal, young Hitoshi. Not everybody can know. Not the three most important adults in my life. Izuku looked between Hitoshi and then to Toshinori. He was letting them talk it out as he listened. He had several things he wanted to say, but this wasn't up to him. This was up to Hitoshi and Hitoshi only. Honestly, Izuku was proud. If this was back then, back when Hitoshi was a twig and scared of all adults, he might have taken such a quirk. But now that he knows his worth, he knows better. Toshinori slumped a little. You're not budging on this, are you? Izuku felt Hitoshi tense before he shook his head. No, All Might, and not. Either we sit down with my dads and discuss this all together, or it's not happening. Your choice. I'm so proud of you. Izuku purred praise and the boy looked at him, stammered, before blushing a little and focusing back around at All Might. Well, he demanded, are we having dinner, or am I calling my dad to pick me up and to finish the internship with him and Bakugo? Oh, an arm twister. Izuku looked at All Might before giving the man a firm nod and gave him a loud snort. The vestiges want you. And if this is what you want, then when's a good time for dinner? Let me text my dads to see. Don't worry, I won't mention all for one or whatever you called the quirk. One for all. Please don't refer to it as the other way around ever again. All Might demanded with a hand over his wound. Hitoshi's eyebrow rose and then he looked at Izuku. All for one is my dad. It's a complicated story in all honesty. Izuku told Hitoshi and Hitoshi hummed. Very well. Oh, and until this dinner takes place, I'm not cleaning this beach. Toshinori looked out at the trash. Fair enough. And Ko bit into the mashed potatoes and let out a noise. These are all really good. Although I won't lie to you, Steven, I'm not a fan of the texture on the meatloaf. She politely wiped her mouth and Steven smiled. Not everybody likes it, but it's a staple of American food. Steven leaned forward with a grin. It also depends on how you make it. I grew up with breadcrumbs, but I know people that use oats for their meatloaf. Uncooked, she gasped, and he nodded with a small laugh. Yep, it cooks with the meat. And Ko stuck her tongue out as her face scrunched like a child. I don't think I'd like that, she admitted. I get that. How have you been? And Ko made a so-so motion with her hand. Okay, I guess. It's not the best being locked up here, but Mitsuki and Masaru are paying for my stay until I'm less. She trailed off and Steven put a hand on her shoulder. You have good friends, Inko. I do, which makes me feel guilty about hurting them with my actions. She fought back her tears. Steven patted her shoulder gently. Then he relaxed in his seat. I think I'll make you Thanksgiving next. Turkey, ham, more mashed potatoes, the works. He smiled fondly. That would be nice. She returned his fond smile and he got up and looked at the time on his watch. I wish I could stay longer, but I have a meeting I need to go to. Inko nodded. Have fun. Steven huffed an amused laugh. Of course, until next time. Then he turned and walked away. Inko watched him go when suddenly a Kiko. The woman sat firmly in the seat that Steven was just in, and with no warning she took Inko's food and started to eat the meatloaf. Heard you say you didn't like it. She grunted. You can have the rest. I just can't stand the slop they service us anymore. Inko snorted. All right then. She then continued to eat the mashed potatoes while a Kiko ate the meatloaf like a starving woman. A Kiko. Kikayo. Inko stared at the woman. A Kiko, or rather Kikayo, rolled her eyes. A Kiko. Kikayo Shinsu is my full name. I hate a Kiko, but I like Kikayo. Okay, Kikayo. Shinsu, you mentioned having a son, right? Kikayo snorted bluntly. Yeah, haven't seen him since he was a babe. She sadly whispered the last part. I think I saw him at the sports festival a while back. Hi, Hiroshi. Itoshi, named after his grandfather. Yeah, the brainwasher. Does that mean you brainwash? Or your husband? Kikayo slowed down her chewing before she stopped suddenly. It's a mix of our quirks. You see, my husband, Katsuya, was a lawyer. He was able to get people to speak on command, and me, I'm able to manipulate people with my mind. Nothing fancy. I can make people do the most basic of things. She pushed her meatloaf around sadly with her fork. Combined together we make brainwashing. Super powerful ... But like I said before, I never really got to see him after he was born. She looked at her arms where needle marks seemed to litter up and down. Her veins were gone. No doubt burst from the abuse she put her body through. Let myself slip. Inko was no longer hungry. What a shame. Don't you want to see him again, your son? Yeah, but ... Look at me. You think he's going to want to hold on to me? To call me mommy? He doesn't know me, and maybe that's the best thing. I guess. She shrugged. I had a son. Inko looked out at the window. Yeah, he killed himself over a year ago. I miss him every day. The day he died, I never got to hold him, to hug him before school, and I want nothing more than to hold him just one more time. Kikayo put the fork down. He wouldn't know who I am. But shouldn't he have a chance? There were a few moments before Kikayo hummed out. Looks like Ria was able to reconcile with her own little monster. Inko looked over to where Kikayo was and saw Ray talking with a dual-haired boy. Half white, half red, and he had a massive scar covering the left side of his face. Even with the scar, it was clear this was a handsome boy. Hey, I know him. He was at the festival as well. I think he's friends with your son if I remember correctly. Kikayo hummed before looking away. I'm not hungry anymore. Then she got up and left just like that. Inko watched her go and then looked back over at Ray. What a lucky woman. Inko could only sigh as she watched Ray share a hug with her son. A lucky woman indeed. Toshinori returned Hitoshi home at the end of the day Friday. Hitoshi, Iri ran from the dining room and directly into her brother's arms. Thankfully, Izuku jumped down just in the nick of time as Hitoshi caught her and held her on his hip. Hitoshi smiled at her and then instantly turned concerned. Your face, he gasped at the shiner under her eye. The bruise extended to the corner of her eye down to the under part of her eye and she was grinning. A ball hit me in the face. Why are you happy about that? He could only ask incredulously. Because I hit the boy who threw the ball at me harder. I broke his nose. Oh dear. Toshinori laughed from the doorway. You just allowed this? He asked Oboro, who came up to them. Oboro wrapped Hitoshi in a hug and kissed him on the forehead with a loving and dramatic "mmmmwa." Oboro then nuzzled Hitoshi's nose with his own nose. Missed you, kiddo. Then and only then did Oboro look at and acknowledge Toshinori. Yeah, the boy purposely did it. I watched him do it. I pulled her off once she got that hit in. He's just lucky that I had the sense to stop her from using her bat. Oboro chuckled to Toshinori. Izuku watched this before he was suddenly aware of a lanky presence. Brat. He looked up at the calico. Brat purred and licked along the top of his head. It's good to see you again. Here I thought you were gone forever. Brat mused with a chuckle before she rubbed against him affectionately. Nah, you aren't getting rid of me that easily. Izuku rubbed his head under her chin. Moss. Brian came rushing up to him and the next thing Izuku knew he was being rubbed heavily by Brian. Brian was clearly trying to get Izuku to smell like him by the way he rubbed all over the green cat. Brian was purring loudly and it made Izuku purr just the same. Miss me. Pumpkin went crazy looking for you. Speaking of Pumpkin, Izuku never saw the orange blur coming until it was too late. Hey, Pumpkin, Hitoshi cooed before leaning down and picking the orange cat up with ease. Hey. Izuku rushed to Hitoshi's legs but it was too late. Hitoshi was now picking up and holding Pumpkin like a baby. Hitoshi. Izuku meowed loudly as he stood up on his hind legs and put his front paws on Hitoshi's legs. Oh, that reminds me. Toshinori turned and walked away briskly but left the door open. So, how were internships? Oboro inquired as he took Pumpkin away from Hitoshi. Izuku took this moment to jump back onto Hitoshi's shoulders and the boy reached up to gently pet him behind the ears. Oh, it was fine. Outside of the fight that I'm sure Dad told you about. He did, and we will be having a discussion as to why you can't wield a knife, but I digress. Oboro lightly poked Hitoshi's nose. So, what's the deal with this dinner that Toshinori requested of us? I pushed him to do it. I told him I wouldn't do what he wants from me unless you guys weigh in. Oboro blinked. Well, whatever it is, it must be important. You know it's going to have to wait until we all have a night off together, which won't happen until next week. Hitoshi nodded. I know. All right, what's it about? Before Hitoshi could speak, Toshinori came back into the house with a cat exercise wheel. Little Mossy, you don't get to call me that. Izuku hissed, but Toshinori just continued unwavering or uncaring. He seemed to enjoy it and I figured why not give it to him as a gift. The other cats will probably be quite pleased with it as well. Toshinori put the wheel down with ease. Oboro inspected it. I don't know where we could put it. Our room, Hitoshi, our room. Izuku urged. I better not wake to you using that thing in the dead of night because you got the zoomies. Hitoshi sighed before speaking up. You can put it in my room. I have the space, plus Moss really likes that thing. Perfect, lead the way. Toshinori said all the while picking the wheel up once again. Hitoshi did just that and told him to put it under the window. The moment it was on the ground, the other cats, all of them, flocked to it just to sniff out the new toy. What is it? Jelly had been the one to ask and she put her paw on it to test it out. The moment the wheel moved, she went back with ears back and was clearly stunned. What is it? She repeated a little more fearfully. Izuku chuckled and jumped down from Hitoshi's shoulder. He parted through the other cats and jumped on the wheel. This, my friends, is a cat wheel. It's to help with exercise and to help get rid of some unwanted energy. Watch. Izuku turned and positioned himself on the wheel before he took off running. Most of the other cats took off in a startled scramble at the noise the wheel made. They would, after a few seconds, turn back around and peek at him as he continued to run. Leave it to Pumpkin to be the one to not understand the concept of if someone is on it, don't get on as well. The orange cat jumped on the wheel as Izuku was running. Izuku tried to warn the orange dumbass, but it was too late and Izuku couldn't stop in time as Pumpkin rolled up and once he was halfway up the loop he fell. He fell right on Izuku. The two cats tumbled to the ground in a heap. Izuku groaned. It was a deep groan from his soul as he now laid under Pumpkin. Remember when you were tiny and somewhat cute? I do, Izuku grumbled. Hey, I'm still cute. Pumpkin batted Izuku's head repeatedly with his paw. You wish. Izuku kept up the low grumble before he stood up with enough force to knock Pumpkin off of him. Pumpkin fell to his back before he snorted and got up. Whatever, mother. I am not worth the headache. Izuku gave his fur a good shake before he looked around the room to see that Hitoshi and the others had left some time ago it seemed. Izuku made a mistake. He turned his back to Pumpkin. So when the orange cat tackled him it was a surprise. Hey, Izuku hissed. Oh. Izuku then yowled when Pumpkin actually bit him. The other cat bit down on Izuku's head. The moment he felt those sharp fangs latch onto him, Izuku sprung his legs back and kicked Pumpkin off of him. The force was enough to kick Pumpkin off of him. The orange cat flew back and Izuku gave himself a shake once he was on his paws. Have you lost your mind? Izuku hissed as his back arched and he stood on his toes. His fur started to bristle as he made himself bigger. Hey, what's going on here? Hitoshi came back to his room. Izuku snorted and felt himself relax as he got off of his toes and padded towards Hitoshi. I don't know, Pumpkin whispered and it made Izuku turn to look at him. Pumpkin looked confused as he stared at the ground. I just wanted to fight you. Izuku's ears twitched before he sauntered out of the room right behind Hitoshi. How strange, Izuku mused. How strange indeed. Izuku ate his fill of field mice and was now laying outside on the grass. It was dark out. The family were eating, while those that were home, Shouta was still gone out for a late-night patrol. So, Izuku decided to have dinner as well. Izuku has been stuck with kibble and the occasional wet cat food for the past week and he was glad to get some mice in his stomach once again. And be out of that vest as well. Boss, Brine padded up to him. Izuku grunted and Brine sat right next to him. Don't move me. Izuku grumbled weakly. I ate 3 mice and if I moved I might pop. Brine gave a weak purring laugh. I can see. Your stomach is rather pudgy. Brine teased and Izuku pouted. You take that back. Brine only purred out a small laugh before he got comfortable in the grass. I have to say this family, these people, they've been great. They're so nice. All the other cats are nice as well. Well, Pumpkin is a little rough around the edges, but he's getting there. Brine stretched out and rested his head on Izuku's back. I really thought it was forever sleep for me in that vet's office. Nope, no forever sleep happening in this household. Izuku laid his head down on his paws as he felt sleep getting ready to take him away. 3 mice was really a lot. I still wonder about Adeli. And about the others as well. Do you think they? Brine mumbled against Izuku's fur and Izuku cracked his eyes open. I'm sure Adeli found a nice home to call her home. The others I can't really speak for. But let's hope for the best. Yeah, I guess. Brine and Izuku stayed like that for a while. Long enough for the dinner inside to be done and the table to be put away and cleaned off. Long enough for the dishes to be done. It was just a nice and comfortable silence. One that was broken when Izuku heard a familiar noise. Bite. Small animal bite. Izuku and Brine both jumped at the neighbor's dog. The original hole in the fence was patched up but Izuku could see paws quickly digging to make a new hole. A snout would poke through every few seconds as the barking grew increasingly more loud and high-pitched as the dog grew more desperate. Bite. Urgh. Brine backed away. Thankfully the two of them were in the middle of the yard and nowhere near the fence. A dog. I hate dogs. His fur bristled with obvious tension and Izuku couldn't blame him in all reality. Come on, let's go back inside. Izuku padded for the door and Brine followed with ease. They were let in the moment Oboro spotted them by the sliding glass door and inside they went away from the crazy dog. The door was shut behind them and the dog was long forgotten out of their minds almost instantly. Izuku would quickly find himself by Hitoshi's side on the couch as the family got together to watch a movie. Hitoshi got to pick and it was an action movie of sorts. Really, Izuku didn't think too hard about it as he would find himself falling asleep sooner rather than later. All in all, it was a good return home, despite Pumpkin's outburst. Izuku was just glad to be home beside his favorite human. Izuku has come to terms with the fact that he hasn't bugged these humans in some time. He needs to keep them on their toes. Never let them know his next move, so to speak. He thought about what he wanted to do that said his Shouta was now the one watching the kids as Oboro. And Hizashi went to work. And Winori brought out her watercolor paint to color while watching TV as Shouta napped on the couch. Oh, Izuku knew just what he needed to do. It was too hard not to do. The man fell asleep. Eri only blinked and tilted her head as Izuku slathered as much wet green paint on his paw as possible. Mossy, she asked him. He, of course, couldn't answer her. Instead he had to hop 3-legged all the way to Shouta's sleeping form. Izuku raised his paw up and went to smack the man only to have Shouta grab his paw before it could happen. I knew you'd try something spicy, Shouta hissed and Izuku swiftly scrambled away without another word. This left Eri howling with laughter as Izuku left one green paw print in his haste to get away from the room. What did you do? Hitoshi demanded the moment he opened the door due to Izuku's frantic pawing. Do I even want to know? Hitoshi was currently getting ready for ballet as he was getting his leotard on. He knows his ass is in trouble. You can't hide behind Hitoshi. Shouta called from the room and Izuku actually made a dash under Hitoshi's blankets. Izuku didn't know what was scaring him more, Shouta's up-and-coming ire or Hitoshi's stern voice. I may have tried to stamp my paw on his face with Iri's paint. How's that not accountable for the ramification of my actions treating you? Hitoshi was smirking now. Izuku could feel it. Oh, shut up. Come on you. Hitoshi grabbed Izuku out from under the covers. No. Izuku stuck his claws into the mattress and Hitoshi had no problems unattaching him from the sheets. Hitoshi then opened the door and presented Izuku to Shouta by holding Izuku under his arms. He's sorry. Hitoshi apologized to Shouta on behalf of Izuku. Then something wet and cold was patted on the top of Izuku's head by Shouta's hand. Paint. White acrylic paint in the perfect shape of a handprint stretched from the top of Izuku's head down to his back. Consider us even. Shouta actually smiled as he held up his white-covered hand for Izuku and Hitoshi to see. This got Iri laughing even harder from the living room. Even Hitoshi chuckled and it was clear he was trying so hard not to. Izuku could feel his friend shake before just let the laughter out. Traitor. Izuku felt his ears go low with irritation as he was not amused by this outcome. You brought it on yourself. Well played, Aizawa Shouta. Well played. I'll be the one with the last laugh. That's a promise. And he would be. When after it was all said and done. And Izuku got a bath because they couldn't have him ingesting paint. Izuku would wait until the dead of night to cast his revenge. Izuku stalked up to the TV in the living room and turned it on. He had on mute at first as he picked out the perfect video. It did take a while as he didn't have thumbs and had to painstakingly pat each button with his paw, but Izuku found the song he wanted. The video was unmuted and put on the highest volume setting and he jumped to the floor at the sheer strength these speakers had. Not only could he not hear himself think, but he could feel the vibrations in the floor and was sure that they were glad they owned a house and weren't back in that apartment, as this would surely garnish complaints. Hell, it just might steal from the neighbor next door. When Shouta and Hisashi both came running out of the bedroom, they were greeted by a dancing Izuku jumping, hopping, and yes, even lightly headbanging to the music, who would quickly be joined by Brian, who didn't really understand what was going on but had the spirit as he hopped around all the same. Yeah, Izuku might have been thrown in cat jail for the night, i.e. the cat carrier, but it was worth it. Come Sunday morning, Izuku wasn't really all that active. He just didn't feel like doing much, but he still tried, even after being released from cat jail. Still, he figured he was fine and was able to still mess around like he had been all weekend. It was Aburo again watching them. They went to watch Iri practice before going out for lunch afterwards. Izuku just wasn't into it, but he continued on. Hitoshi tried to give him a nugget in the restaurant, but Izuku turned it down. This made Hitoshi frown. Everything all right? Hitoshi, no mind reading in public. Aburo told him. At home only, remember. Sorry, Papa. Hitoshi corrected himself before putting the nugget down. When they got home, Hitoshi tried again as he set Izuku down on the bed. You seem down. Everything okay? He asked while he took off his jacket to hang up. No energy. I think I just need to sleep. Okay. If you need anything, I'm here. I'll leave you be. Thanks. Izuku would sleep. He would sleep most of Sunday away. In all honesty, he hardly moved from his spot on Hitoshi's bed as he just allowed himself to sleep. No dreams. No Namuhim, no uncles, and no purgatory, just blissful sleep. PSD. Mossy. Izuku was awoken when Brian nudged him. HRM. Izuku opened his bleary eyes and could hardly focus on his friend. Yes, I got you a mouse. He put the dead mouse on Hitoshi's bed. I got it for you. You seemed like you needed the energy. You hunted a mouse for me. Yes, Brian purred with happiness. It was surprisingly easy. I know I was one of the worst at hunting, but this guy was hardly moving, so hunting him was easy. Here you go. He urged the mouse to Izuku. Thanks, Brian ... but I'm not all that hungry. Maybe give it to one of the other cats. But you've hardly eaten, Brian insisted by pushing the mouse again towards Izuku. I know. I just don't think I can stomach it. Brian's ears went down. Okay, maybe Pumpkin will want it or something. He grabbed his mouse and retreated. Then Izuku went back to sleep. When he woke up again, it was Monday and Hitoshi was shaking him awake. Boss, and Izuku couldn't believe it, he felt sick. Izuku only felt sick once while a cat, and that was when he ate that chocolate cake during Hitoshi's birthday. This was unexpected and wasn't like when he ate the cake. When he ate the cake, he just felt nauseated and sickly. This was different. His head was swimming, stomach cramping, and his legs were constantly cramping up. His breathing felt shallow as he panted horribly. He hardly even had the energy to stand. Still, he didn't want to worry anyone, so he kept his ill feelings and his sickness to himself. Though, Hitoshi was no idiot. He quickly realized that Izuku wasn't in top shape. Hitoshi even asked Izuku if he wanted to stay home or if he wanted to go to a vet, but Izuku reassured Hitoshi that he'd be fine. that he can do this and he'll just lay down all day until lunch. So, it was no shock that he didn't even make it until noon before he died. Izuku's sickness grew and grew uncontrollably as he felt himself suddenly start to drool thickly. Everyone was in the middle of a math test with ectoplasm making rounds, with two of himself, to make sure nobody was cheating. His breathing became labored and loud, which almost immediately caused people to look his way. "Eyes on your tests, please," Ectoplasm said a little sternly as he came up to Hitoshi and Moss. Izuku wheezed before standing up suddenly. His legs wobbled and he immediately crashed down to his side. As Hitoshi paused and quickly corrected himself. "Moss." He leaned over the side of his desk, but Ectoplasm gave his fingers a bit of a snap. "If you can't pay attention, then you shouldn't have your cat with you. He's clearly not well," Hitoshi argued before Ectoplasm could fully finish. The first time Hitoshi had ever dared raise his voice and argue against an adult male. Hitoshi then reached over the side of his desk in his defiance and picked Moss up. Izuku only knew suffering as he wheezed and frothed at the mouth while he tried to pant through the pain. Thick saliva continued to run from his mouth and on Hitoshi's desk. "Hidashi," Izuku tried to say, but even through the mind link it was hard. Then he vomited and he lost consciousness. Hitoshi gasped when Izuku proceeded to vomit all over his desk before going limp for just a second. Hitoshi really wondered if Izuku had just died in front of everyone, and it was clear the others all wondered the same as everyone was silent, just looking at the limp Moss in Hitoshi's arms. Moss." Hitoshi breathed out and then Moss yowled. Moss did not die. Not yet anyways, as he then seized Hitoshi's arms. "Moss," he cried in alarm. Moss's whole body jerked and twitched against Hitoshi as he yowled in pain. His mouth was wide open and not closing, his eyes rolled up into the back of his head. Drool ran down the side of his mouth and coated his fur in a messy, thick, foamy trail. That wasn't all, his blood was now running down his nose and down the side of his face. Both nostrils were bleeding heavily. Hitoshi only felt panic. He didn't know what to do. This wasn't anything he faced before. It was like a blessing when Kuda's hands came into view. "Desk," Kuda instructed, and with no warning he took Moss directly from Hitoshi's arms. Kuda was nothing but gentle as he laid Moss on the desk and then proceeded to put his hand under Moss's head as the cat continued to seize. Everyone was watching with rapt attention. Even Ectoplasm was watching this unfold. Then Izuku came to a stop, falling limp with his face pressed firmly against Kuda's hand, blood coating the kid's hand. Izuku's whole body was completely and utterly still with his mouth and eyes still open. "Oh shit, he died." Hitoshi didn't know how he was going to lie about this one. Not with the whole class watching. Kuda clearly caught on to Izuku's untimely death and gently let the cat's head fall against the desk. Blood continued to run out of his nose and pool against Hitoshi's desk. "Is he?" Mina had her hand to her mouth in shock. Ada shook his head. I think he is." Well, Ada and Mina both ate those words roughly about 30 seconds later. Izuku blinked and his eyes rolled down. Several classmates either cried out with relief while others cried out in fear. Then he quickly sat up and shook his pelt. "I feel much better," Izuku told Hitoshi after he gave himself a few licks to clean himself. Then he gave himself a scratch with his hind leg, causing his vest to rattle and little droplets of blood to go flying and spraying a few poor people, Kuda and Hitoshi included. "You are unbelievable," Hitoshi huffed out loud. "That cat is freaky. I'm pretty sure it was dead a second ago." Denki gave a scared little laugh. "It looks like it was just a seizure. I'd have him checked for epilepsy," Kuda then surprised Hitoshi when he leaned in close. "Or Passen." He added the last part so quietly that Hitoshi almost didn't hear him. Izuku licked the blood off of his nose and it was like it never happened. "Poison," Hitoshi whispered and then looked at Izuku, who was looking at him now. "Are you done being dramatic?" He played it up. Truthfully, he was worried, but he couldn't let the others see. Izuku responded in kind by sticking his little pink tongue out at Hitoshi and then hopping back down on the ground where he started cleaning himself and being a lot more lively. Hitoshi looked at his ruined math test and scrunched his nose in disgust. "Mr. Ectoplasm, if it's not too much." He raised his cat vomit and blood-covered paper up by the corner and away from him. "Can I get a new test and some sanitation wipes?" Izuku's time in purgatory had been short and sweet. He died for approximately 1 minute. While in purgatory, he looked out at the sea of dead mosses, and sure enough, a new body was added, and it was as he feared. The body was unharmed and looked like he had died in his sleep. Same as the original anomaly. Well, it wasn't an anomaly now, was it? No, he was poisoned. How rude. The question was how. His body clearly had no problems fighting off sickness. When he was living in the abandoned school, he was the only cat that didn't get sick because of his healing factor. So, whoever was poisoning him was doing it in high amounts. Probably enough to kill a human. So, who? Hitoshi was holding him as the two of them tried to remain calm for the facade, though he could feel Hitoshi shake. It was lunchtime now and he knew exactly where Hitoshi was going, the teacher's lounge. Hitoshi kept his hold on him tight. Finally, they got there and opened the door. "Hey, Hitoshi." Nimiri was the first to greet him with a smile. Hitoshi didn't smile or even acknowledge her as he went to the first parent he could find. It happened to be Oboro, as Aizawa was gone with Vlad King again. Off to Aldera, he supposed, to continue their crusade to shut that hell school down. Oboro was eating at his desk, with no eerie insight, probably because his Ashi promised to take her to McDonald's for lunch if she did get on her tests. She must have. Hello, dear. Oboro looked at Hitoshi and then did a double take, clearly taking in Hitoshi's stricken face and tight hold on Moss. What's wrong? He gave Hitoshi his full attention. Hitoshi leaned in close so those midnight wouldn't hear what he had to say next. Moss died. We think he was poisoned. Poisoned? Oboro asked and Hitoshi nodded. How can you be sure? He was really lethargic yesterday for starters, and today he not only vomited, but he had problems breathing, and right before he died he was drooling, had a nosebleed, and seized up in my arms. Any witnesses? Yeah, the whole class. Shit. Thankfully, his body healed almost immediately after, so people just thought he had a seizure, but still it was a close call. Hitoshi held Izuku a little tighter. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I think I already have an idea about who may be poisoning him, and I honestly hope I'm wrong. Now, please go to lunch. Oboro was tense, and Hitoshi knew it wasn't because of Hitoshi but because of the situation they were in. Of course. Hitoshi spoke normally for this next part. I also gave Ectoplasm a little bit of an attitude in case he gets back to you about it. It was just because he didn't want me to check up on Moss. I mean, in the end, he was the one who had to clean up Moss's vomit off my desk, so. Hitoshi grumbled and rubbed at the back of his neck. Nimari snorted. Way to go, kid. She then raised her hand for a high five. Don't take flack from anyone. Hitoshi looked at her before gently tapping her hand against his. We still on for the mall this weekend? He asked her and she beamed. You know it. Oh, I'm going to spoil you. Hitoshi then walked out after that. How are you feeling, buddy? Izuku shrugged a little. Perfectly fine, he told Hitoshi, and Hitoshi scratched him behind the ear. Who knew that poison heals faster than broken bones? You're telling me. Nezu and Izuku had something in common. Nezu liked to sit on the shoulders of people, and Izuku found himself quite comfortable laying across Nezu's shoulders. He had himself draped around the stout's neck like a green scarf. I heard about what happened before lunch, Nezu told him. That must have been quite scary, I take it. Yeah, it certainly wasn't fun. I'm just glad I lost consciousness during the seizure. Izuku mumbled against the crook of Nezu's neck while he watched the principal work. I died for a whole minute before I was back. The quickest I've ever died and come back. It makes sense. In that past, you were mutilated in some way or another, so it took your body longer to heal the broken bones and get you back into tip-top shape. Here, however, it was all in your blood. Once you died, your body probably reset in a way. Nezu explained while he flipped the paper he was working on over and continued to write. Yeah, that does make sense. What are you working on anyways? No, see. Nezu gave Izuku a tiny flick. Maybe so. It's just getting the paperwork ready for the dorms. I have to go in front of the HPSC today and see if they're going to agree on the dorms. If yes, then we don't have to worry about villains getting to the students, or having something that happened to Hitoshi happen to anyone else. If not, then, well, I'll just have to try again at another time. Nezu finished up his writing and then put his paper away. Also, since Aldera is shutting down, it's been announced today by Shouta, we got the evidence we need. I need to prepare to start the public school, including teachers and a new principal. While I'll be overseeing the operation, I cannot be the principal, mainly because the HPSC will be all over me and the school. Then ... How are you starting this school up if not for the HPSC's involvement? Izuku tilted his head and Nezu hummed. Out of my own pocket, of course. It'll be a nice little nest egg to sit on and a good investment. The only say the HPSC can give me is just the standard guidelines, which, as mentioned, I plan to follow strictly. However, they can't stick their noses in my business as long as it's not a hero school, which it's not. What are you going to name it? Nezu Junior High, of course. It's still my school as I bought it. Nezu beamed at Izuku, and honestly, Izuku couldn't blame him. If Izuku bought a school, he'd name it after himself. Izuku stayed wrapped around Nezu's neck for the remainder of the day, the two of them just talking about future plans about what's going to happen to UA and Nezu Junior High alike. It was nice. Izuku didn't even realize he fell asleep around Nezu's neck until he was shaken awake. Ready to go, Spicy? Shouta asked him, and Izuku smacked his lips before stretching out his legs and claws alike. He then gave a big yawn, and when he brought his mouth down he was met with a furry finger in his mouth. Bleh, don't do that, Izuku warned his mentor, to which Nezu chuckled. I just had to see if you'd do that, Nezu mused when Izuku jumped off of his shoulders. Izuku stretched himself out once more before padding up to Shouta. Shouta had his hair up in a nice half ponytail and had clearly just gotten back by his crisp and clean outfit. Izuku walked and then jumped into Shouta's arms. Izuku could smell pumpkin on the man and had to fix that. You smell like pumpkin. Izuku rubbed his neck and cheek against Shouta's chest repeatedly. Someone's affectionate. Probably trying to stay out of cat jail tonight. Shouta chuckled and Izuku felt the man's chest rumble with his laugh. More like getting a scent off of you that he doesn't like. Nezu smiled and Shouta chuckled. Of course, thanks for watching him, Nezu. Anytime. He makes wonderful company. Hitoshi put Izuku down the moment they were home. I'm sure you're hungry. Hitoshi never even got to open the sliding door when Shouta stopped him by getting in front of Hitoshi. No, you can eat kibble. I need to check something. Shouta grunted and then gestured for the kitchen where the other cat bowls were sitting. Where Brat was eating now. Izuku didn't care for kibble and it was clear that the distaste showed on his face. Moss, I need to make sure the mice aren't poisoning you, Shouta told him and Izuku's ears perked. The mice. Izuku's ears went down as the night before came back into his mind. You hunted a mouse. Yes, it was surprisingly easy. This guy was hardly moving. Maybe Pumpkin will want it or something. Maybe Pumpkin will want it. Maybe Pumpkin will. Maybe Pumpkin. Pumpkin. Izuku scrambled against the linoleum tile before he finally got his footing. Pumpkin, he called, rushing after the other cat. Pumpkin. Izuku saw orange and he didn't even think about stopping as he barreled into the other cat full speed. Pumpkin, and he collided in an orange and green ball. Pumpkin looked genuinely shocked when Izuku managed to get him on his back. Did you eat that mouse last night? Izuku demanded before sniffing the cat, like that would help. What? The mouse Brian caught. Did you eat it? I don't know. I didn't want it. Pumpkin whispered almost fearfully and Izuku relaxed. Thank goodness. Did anybody else eat it? I dunno. Pumpkin stood and just looked away from Izuku, unable to meet his eyes. Well, it was still a relief that Pumpkin didn't eat it and Izuku quickly made rounds to the other cats. Jelly was on the scratching post. She didn't eat it. Tinnitum was laying on the couch. He didn't want anything to do with it. Brian was actually in Izuku's bed. He didn't eat it. In fact, he threw it back outside when Pumpkin didn't want it, which was a relief to Izuku, but still he wanted to check all bases as Brat liked to go outside to sunbathe on the hotter days. He felt immediately relieved when Brat told him that actually kicked that mouse away from her. It had a stench to it that I didn't like. She told him and Izuku was finally able to relax by collapsing right next to Brat. Shouta and Hitoshi both walked through the yard and it didn't take long for Shouta to find what he feared. The first blue pellet. It was against the fence separating him and his neighbor. Found one, Hitoshi called and he picked up a pellet from the grass. This one is more towards the center of the yard. Shouta narrowed his eyes and then looked through the grass quickly. He walked away from the fence and after a few minutes, he found another one. I bet he's just tossing these in our yard. Can't you call the cops? I could, however, I doubt they'd do anything. Nope, I'm a hero and I'm going to talk to him myself. Don't let Moss eat the mice from the backyard until we collect all of the poison pellets. I'll be back. Shouta never felt anger more than now. Maybe a part of him should be happy that the only cat that got hurt was the cat with the healing factor and immortality. But still, that doesn't change the fact that one of his cats had been targeted. Absolutely nobody hurts one of Shouta Aizawa's cats and gets away with it. Shouta's shoulders were squared, his posture tense, and his fists clenched with both rat poison pellets in his hands. He walked through the house and out the front door. Shouta made it to the neighbor's house and was pounding on the door before he knew it. It didn't take long for the dickbag to open the door, but he wasn't the first to greet Shouta. No, his barking dog was the first to greet him. The dog was held back by its collar as it nearly lunged at the hero with several loud barks leaving its mouth. What? The man barked just as loudly as his dog. I know you've been poisoning my cats, Shouta growled and showed the man the evidence that was nearly crushed into a fine blue powder in Shouta's hand. The man had the audacity to smirk. I haven't done a thing. Sure, I've been putting rat poison in my yard and last I checked that wasn't a crime. It is when the poison is clearly in my yard. Shouta snarled at the man. Hey, if the rats and squirrels pick it up and bring it to your yard, it's not my fault. The man hissed right back into Shouta's face. It's also not my fault if your cats are dumb enough to eat the pellets or the poisoned animals. I'm warning you now. Stop, if you know what's good for you. The man huffed while keeping his dog held back. I'm not scared of three fags or their tranny son. Stay off of my property. Then the door was shut in Shouta's face. Shouta felt his face turn red with anger as he stared at the door. Oh, he wanted to kick the door in and beat the man to a pulp. Insulting Shouta's family with such words was a surefire way to get yourself a fast pass to the hospital. But Shouta restrained himself. Instead, he settled on yelling through the door. I'm warning you, I'm a hero, and if I catch you tossing poison over our fence, I'll arrest your ass. Hear me? Then he turned away with a huff. Asshole. Oh, Shouta had lots of things he wanted to do, but he needed to be calm and not let his emotions get the better of him. Oh, that neighbor was going to get what was coming to him. It was only a matter of time. The man was illogical and would mess up before too long. What was important was that they didn't scoop down to his level. The very next morning it was pretty standard as Iri and Hitoshi both got ready for school. Hitoshi was helping Iri tie her shoes as he was already finished. Mr. Mirio is really nice. Iri was beaming while she retold how she ran into Mirio, Nejire, and Amajiki in the hallway the other day. And Nejire is sweet, but she does ask a lot of questions. Yeah, I know that feeling. Hitoshi was smiling at his little sister before he finished tying her shoes off. Alright, I got to go and get my teeth brushed. K. It took Hitoshi roughly 3 minutes to finish brushing his teeth and washing his face, and in those 3 minutes, Eri did something that he never saw coming. Tada. Because he's a baby. Eri cried happily while holding Moss by his underarms. Moss, sweet Moss, was shoved inside a baby onesie by Eri. Izuku was less than impressed as he stared at Hitoshi. Izuku's ears were far back and his eyes narrowed. Hitoshi, if you don't get this off of me. PBTH. Hitoshi put a hand over his mouth to stop himself from laughing out loud. It was an adorable pink onesie with a yellow collar and button, one that clearly belonged to Eri's baby doll. All of Izuku's paws were covered as it was a onesie with footies and mittens. I think you should. Hitoshi turned away to cover his laughter. I think you should show that to the Fosters, huh? Hitoshi had to put both hands over his mouth as he turned away fully. He was going to lose it. You're right. Come on, Mossy. I hate you. You know you love me. Hitoshi thought back with a grin. It took roughly 30 seconds later before an uproarious laughter was heard from the kitchen by all three men. That's all it took for Hitoshi to lose his cool and break down into his own uproarious laughter. Hitoshi had to stagger his way into the kitchen through his wheezing laughter, and he only got a second wind when he saw that Eri had now put Izuku down and his friend was having trouble walking. His paws were constantly flicking as he tried to walk and couldn't get stable ground because of the footies and mittens stopping him. Hitoshi. Izuku tried to speak, but he wound up falling down as he just couldn't get the feel right. This is worse than the vest. Okay, Hitoshi wiped the tears from his eyes. Cute, really cute, but we have to get his vest on and I don't think anyone will take him seriously inside of a onesie. Hitoshi exhaled slowly and fanned the tears away from his eyes before walking up to Izuku. Izuku sighed with relief when he was picked up and freed from the dreaded onesie. Keep that, sweetheart. I want to get pictures of him in it later, Hitoshi told Eri. Don't push your luck. Izuku thought bitterly and Hitoshi smiled at him. You know you love me and will do anything for me. Hitoshi cooed while holding Izuku in the air. Bite me. Come on, Izuku, don't be that way. Hitoshi laughed as he started to exit the kitchen, only to stop at the clatter behind him. He looked over the Fosters, unaware of his slip-up at first. He saw the varying degree of concern on each of their faces, from confused to straight-up intrigue. Then, when he looked at Shouta, did it click? Whoops, Hitoshi breathed out. It was bound to happen sooner or later, Izuku responded. I can explain. He started while holding Izuku to his chest. You called him Izuku. Shouta looked at his coffee before setting it down. I'm smart enough to know that there is no way that's a coincidence given everything leading up to this point. Hitoshi, don't waste your time or insult our intelligence. I'm only going to ask this once. How long have you known? Hitoshi and Izuku shared a look before looking back at the Fosters. Since we established the connection. I see. So this is Izuku. But the Namu. Aburo looked at Moss. We don't know exactly either. We just know that Namu isn't Izuku. At least not mentally. Hitoshi shrugged. Shouta hummed. Nedzu knows then. I bet he was the first to know. I'm more than willing to bet that's how he came to know about all of Aldera's misdeeds. Isn't it, Spicy? Izuku only nodded and Shouta took a long sip from his coffee. It explains why you hate All Might and your clear disdain for Bakugo as well. Shouta looked into the bottom of his mug and put it down. In all honesty, I don't know how I feel about this, or how I should feel. Izuku ducked his head down with his ears low. Eri came back into the kitchen and seemed unaware of the tension in the room. Daddy, she tugged on Hizashi's arm. I think I left my crayons in the car. Can I go and get them? Of course, baby. Here, Hizashi took the keys out and clicked them. Outside they heard the car unlock. Remember to shut the door, okay. Eri nodded and then took off. Then it was them again. It's a lot to take in, I know. Hitoshi said once Eri was gone. I didn't know how to feel either, but he's still Moss. He just happens to have all of Izuku's memories. Look, Spicy Moss Izuku, I don't want to tell you how to live your life. If you want to be a house cat with immortality, that's fine, but I think you should at the very least see your mother. Mom. Izuku's ears perked at the mention of his mother. Truthfully, as selfish as it's been, he hasn't thought of her since he met Hitoshi. He figured she was fine without him, probably even thriving now that she didn't have to care for her quirkless son anymore. Well, if Shouta was going to say something, it was cut off by a scream from outside. A scream that got everyone scrambling, as it was Eri's scream. It wasn't a scared scream, but a scream of pain. Shouta was the first out the door with Hizashi almost directly behind him. Izuku got outside with Hitoshi. Eri was on the driveway screaming as that dog, that damned Akita, knew had Eri's leg in its maw and was shaking her. Shouta didn't hesitate. The man charged and kicked the Akita directly against its face, showing the dog the direct end of his boot with a force that caused the dog to yelp in pain and let Eri go. Aburo was the one to snatch Eri off of the ground. Eri was screaming still while she cried against Aburo's chest. The Akita was snarling at Shouta, showing off its sharp teeth. Then Izuku saw it. just a spark of intelligence behind the dog's eyes as it went from Shouta to Hitoshi. The dog then took off directly for Hitoshi. Shouta, thinking the dog was coming for him, miscalculated his scarf throw and missed the dog. Hitoshi put his arm up as it was clear the dog was going to attack. Izuku jumped and landed directly on the dog's back with a yowl. "Don't touch my human," Izuku screamed at the dog. "Bite, bite, bite." Izuku bit him all right. In fact, he grabbed the dog's ear and pulled it with his fangs. He felt the skin tear in a bloody mess that got the dog's attention off of Hitoshi, and the dog reached behind himself with his mouth and yanked Izuku off. "Kill." Izuku let out a yowl as the dog started to shake its head violently from side to side to try and kill Izuku. Mossy. It was a sight to behold when Brian ran out of the house and jumped on the dog. "Leave him alone." Brian yowled and dug his claws into the dog's fur. Pumpkin was next charging out of the house with Jelly not far behind him. Both cats joined in as they all jumped and crawled to get the dog to let Izuku go. Ultimately, it was Hitoshi that got the dog to let go. Following his dad's example, Hitoshi charged, threw his foot back and kicked the dog hard across the face. "Let go of my cat." It worked and Izuku was dropped like a bad habit. The dog yelped and quickly gave himself a good shake to get the others off of him. Pumpkin and the others hit the ground, all of them snarling and yowling, their fur raised ready and looking ready to attack again. "Mother, are you okay?" Pumpkin called to Izuku. Izuku would be lying if he said he wasn't in pain. He was in pain, but it was something he could easily push past while he stood unsteadily on his paws. Aizawa shot his weapon out again once he was able to get clean shot on the dog, and he wrapped it around the dog's neck with a snarl. That was when the neighbor came out of his house cursing a storm at Shouta. "Come on, Izuku," Hitoshi whispered and scooped his cat into his arms. "Let's go inside and get you patched up." There was a noise that made both of them turn. The neighbor had punched Shouta right in the face. Shouta's head really just snapped back for a second, and that second was all that was needed for the neighbor to yank the capture weapon off of his dog. The dog apparently had its beady eyes on a new prey, and before anyone could stop it, the dog rushed forwards barking and snarling. Brat, the poor thing, had just poked her head out with tinnitum to see the commotion. Or maybe they were told to stay out of the fight as neither cat could defend themselves. Well, regardless, she had no time to react when the Akita dog snatched her by her middle and took off running down the street. "Brat," Izuku cried, and he kicked his way out of Hitoshi's grip. The moment he was on the ground, Izuku wasn't far behind the dog and Pumpkin wasn't far behind Izuku. Izuku ran with Pumpkin. He was doing his hardest to keep up with the dog, but the dog had much longer legs and was bigger than the two cats chasing him. Of course, this beast chose the one cat who can't properly defend herself. Izuku thought in anger. "Hang on, Brat," he cried to his friend. He only heard yowling in response, which made him pick up the speed. First, the dog ran down the street. Then it turned down an alleyway. Izuku and Pumpkin both turned down the alley but were met with an empty alleyway. Izuku's chest rose quickly with each pant that left his mouth. He kept his mouth gaped open and his tongue out to help cool himself down as he looked around and listened. They've been running for so long, but he can't give up now. The yowling was off in the distance, but it was there. "This way, Pumpkin." Izuku picked up just where the yowling seemed to be coming from. "Hang on, Brat. We're on our way." Izuku charged forward as fast as he could and as hard as his legs could allow. The alleyway was tight as they turned down another interconnecting way. Thankfully, they were cats and not humans. Yeah, their paws got wet with dingy and dirty gutter water, but that was the least of their worries at the moment. Izuku just kept pushing forward until they got to another opening that was much wider. Akita Inu was standing in the other alley. In its sharp maw was a limp Brat while the dog was shaking her body vigorously with blood and spittle flying from its mouth. Izuku growled and squared himself up. "Hey, dumbass," he roared to the dog, and that instantly got the dog's attention. The Inu spat Brat's limp body from its mouth and went down low to the ground as he also squared up. "Small, bite, kill, kill," the dog chanted before barking right back at Izuku. Izuku's fur rose and he tried to make himself bigger to scare the dog off. "Pumpkin, get Brat and run home." "Mother," the Akita charged before Pumpkin could protest, and Izuku charged as well. The two of them clashed in the middle with Izuku extending his claws out in midair before he made contact with the dog. Izuku landed on the Inu's head and his stomach was dangerously close to its sharp teeth. He kept himself attached to the dog with his claws before he bit down as hard as he could. The dog let out a loud yelp of pain when Izuku tried to scratch at the dog's face with his claws. "Mother," Pumpkin looked torn as he looked between Izuku and then at Brat's limp form. "Get her out of here." Teeth wrapped around Izuku's body as the dog managed to get a hold on his body. "I'll be fine." Izuku was then shaken. The shake was violent and made the world spin for him as his head whipped from side to side, and he then felt something snap before he was thrown on the ground. "Kill, eat." The dog stared down at Izuku. Izuku hit the floor when the dog slammed him down onto the alleyway floor. Izuku tried to stand. God, did he try. His whole body quaked as he tried to stand up, but his paws gave out and he fell down. Pumpkin, brat won't be. Izuku breathed out while the dog got low again, snarling, mouth coated in blood and dripping saliva. Kill. Pumpkin. Go. Pumpkin's ears went back as he looked shaken. Don't fight with your mother. Go. Izuku roared. It was like something visibly clicked for Pumpkin as Izuku watched his eyes shrink into slits. I fought worse dogs than you. Pumpkin roared before getting down low and squaring himself up. My name is Pumpkin and nothing happens without my permission or knowing. A noise that could only be described as a war cry left Pumpkin's mouth in a caterwaul before the orange cat charged at the Akita. Pumpkin, no. Izuku cried, but it was too late as the cat jumped on the dog and started to bite and scratch. Izuku could only watch as the two were just a flurry of teeth, claws, and paws, with Pumpkin being the first to bring the dog down to its side. The dog tried to bite and get Pumpkin off, but Pumpkin, clearly a veteran against fighting dogs, was too fast for the dog to grab onto. He became too slippery for the dog to catch. Eventually, Pumpkin managed to get up to the dog's neck and he bit it. Hard enough to make the dog yelp as blood leaked from the bite. Just like that, the dog was done. His rampage over as he managed to shake Pumpkin off of him with one good and massive shake. Then the dog ran. Pumpkin stood, whole body puffed up, shoulders squared as he panted heavily. It turns out the dog wasn't that slow as Pumpkin's right ear was missing a piece. That's what you get. Pumpkin hissed before he turned to Izuku. Did you see me? I sent that mutt running. Good job. Izuku whispered as Pumpkin came padding up to him. Izuku wheezed in and out before looking at Brat. Go bring Brat home, he ordered through his pants. But Moth Pumpkin gasped and then blinked hard as if he was trying to remember or realize something. I shouldn't just leave you. Home is far away. I'll be fine. Brat won't be. Go, Izuku told Pumpkin in a weak whisper. He felt his consciousness threaten to slip. I'll be back as soon as possible. Just stay put. That's an order. I'm the leader of the house. Pumpkin roared before he puffed up and then turned to Brat. And that includes you. Pumpkin's voice turned into a grumble before he grabbed Brat by her neck and then put her over his back. Of course, Pumpkin. I'll be back. Then Pumpkin took off in a run. Then, there was just Izuku, lying there dying for the second time in a week. Once alone and Pumpkin was gone, Izuku rested his head fully on the ground. Itoshi. Izuku, I'm glad to hear from you. Itoshi spoke quickly through the mind link. I'm sure you gave that dog a good whacking for Eri. Aburo and Hisashi are taking Eri to the hospital. The bite is bad. She's bleeding real bad as well. Hopefully they get her to a doctor with a good healing quirk. I'm with Aizawa. He beat the shit out of the neighbor. I mean, it's something I may have to tell my therapist. How's Brat? Pumpkin is coming back with her on his back. Tell Aizawa to get ready to take her to the vet, he ordered, and he felt Itoshi was still on the other side. Izuku, are you dying again? The dog broke something in. I don't think I'm going to make it by the time Pumpkin comes back. I may not come back home for a while. I'm going to try, and Izuku forced himself up to his paws. His whole body jerked before he nearly fell down. Hide. Pumpkin shouldn't see my dead body. Izuku, don't hide. Please ... don't hide. That's very... Hitoshi's voice died down with worry. That's too real. No, tell me where you are. I'll come and get you and make you comfy. Izuku got up to his feet. He looked around and already found a hiding spot. It was a mattress leaning against the wall. He started to painfully limp. I don't know. I just followed the dog and we took too many turns. Izuku realized he couldn't move his hind left leg and was just dragging it along the ground. He had to hop. This was ... This was new for Izuku. Most, if not all of his deaths, have been quick. Yeah, the poison was slow because it took a few days, but the death itself was quick. This wasn't quick. This was dragging out as his vision blurred horribly as he tried to drag himself behind the mattress. Come on, Izuku, work with me. Izuku fell just short of the mattress. He hit the ground with a groan. Still, he used his claws to drag himself closer and closer towards the mattress. His vision was starting to darken around the edges. Izuku, say something. Something popped out of the mattress. Izuku smelt a familiar scent invading his nose before the figure came closer to him with simple steps. Well, I never thought I'd see you again. Izuku died seconds after. Once in purgatory, Izuku stayed as moss. He looked away from his own dead bodies and over towards the door that was often, but not always, shut. It was wide open. Izuku padded up to the door and poked his head in. Uncle, he mewed into the deep darkness that met him. Uncle Yoichi, he called after a few seconds of silence. Izuku, come on down. Yoichi called back from the darkness. Izuku sat firmly as he stared blankly down into the darkness. Izuku, you still there? You're not my Uncle Yoichi. Izuku mewed as he stared down into the darkness. The hand shot through the darkness and Izuku was quick to jump back just before it could grab at him. A voice growled through the darkness as the hand retreated. How'd you know? The voice changed back to normal as the last of the freckled hand vanished amongst the void. I thought I got his voice down perfectly. I didn't. Izuku smirked before he shut the door with his paw. The door was heavy but it shut with a slam. Stay out. he roared to the door. Then he turned around, ready to just lay down and wait his time in purgatory out. A hand wrapped tightly around his throat and pulled him up off of the ground. Izuku couldn't breathe as he looked into his own hate-filled eyes. The Namu looked deranged as he was grinning madly at Izuku. Your walls are getting weaker, the Namu told him before he applied pressure to Izuku's neck. It was just a dream. Izuku gasped in shock as he came back to life. He took several deep pants as he tried to calm his racing heart. He gave the place a quick look around. He could hear rain, but he wasn't near the water. In fact, he was nice, dry, and warm. Izuku quickly realized that he was inside of a mattress, and that he wasn't alone. Izuku turned and just stared at his savior. Angel, he whispered. He almost couldn't believe it was really her. Angel looked at him before giving a purr of laughter. You've gotten bigger, Kit. Angel spoke softly to him. I have to say, I never expected to see you again. Certainly didn't expect to see you heal from a nasty dog bite right in front of my eyes. How long have I been? Angel shrugged. A while. Long enough for the sun to go down and for the rain to take over, she explained in a soft voice. Izuku groaned out before he started to stand. His body wobbled for a moment, but he was able to quickly stabilize himself. Thank you, Angel. You probably stopped a predator from getting to my body. I owe you, Angel. Angel stood up with him and then gave her long fur a shake. Yeah, she stretched out and then clawed at the fabric below as she arched her back. You do. Izuku walked out of the mattress and looked around. The air around was cool and a breeze swept by and nearly got him soaked from the downpour of rain just on the outside of the alley. He felt his ears go down in irritation before he stepped away from the road and into the alley, which was being protected by the roof of the building the mattress was under. Where are you going to go now? Angel asked him as she also stepped out of the mattress. Izuku looked back at her and then smiled weakly. Home. My human is undoubtedly worried sick about me. Oh, found a new home, did ya? It's thanks to you. That human you led me to ... He's mine now. Oh, that's where he went to. I knew something happened when I went to him this winter and he just ... wasn't there. I thought he'd. She turned away with a sigh. I'm glad he's okay. I am too. Izuku looked at his paws and then back at Angel. You know, you can probably live with us. No, shut him down instantly before shaking her head. I told you, kitten. I work and live alone, but your offer is nice. Izuku gave her one last smile. Well, Mother. Both Izuku and Angel turned as Pumpkin turned the corner. There you are. I told you to stay put. I thought Pumpkin gritted his teeth before he suddenly stood on his hind legs and roughly cuffed Izuku's ear. I was worried. Then he batted Izuku's head with both of his paws in rapid succession. Mother, Angel asked with a blink. It's a long story. I thought you got your memories back. Izuku turned to Pumpkin with a scoff. If Pumpkin could blush, his face would be a bright red. I don't need your criticism. More bats against Izuku's skull. I told you to wait. The big orange cat almost yowled in his ire. Angel's eyes softened and she curled her tail around her paws. You should go home, kitten. I'm sure it's more than just your son that's worried about you. Right, Angel. I'll see you again. I know I will. Perhaps. Angel watched the two of them quickly run off for their home. No doubt. I never thought I'd see that orange cat again, she whispered once the two of them were completely gone. Mother, and here I thought he recognized me. Then Angel looked up at the nearest fire escape. She had places to be. Izuku and Pumpkin made it home in the rain. By the time they got to the door, they were both soaked to the bone. The smell of blood lingered in the air and Izuku wasn't sure if it was Iri's blood or the neighbor's. All he knew was the blood was in the air. They both got to the door and both of them quickly got on their hind legs and he started to run their paws against the door and they started to meow. Itoshi, I'm back with Pumpkin. Izuku called through the link. We're at the front door. There was a few seconds of silence before footsteps padded through the home and the door was open. Izuku walked in with Pumpkin right beside him. Whoa. Izuku gasped when he was immediately grabbed and pulled up by Hitoshi. Hitoshi was quick to look him over. When Hitoshi determined that Izuku was fine and alive, he pulled him into a hug. You worried me, Hitoshi breathed. Then he pulled Izuku back and flicked his nose. Punk, you owe me those onesie pictures. Fair. Izuku sighed, though the idea of wearing such a garment didn't particularly entertain him. How's Iri? How's Brat? Iri, I'll show you ... As for Brat, she's still at the vet's. Aizawa immediately rushed her to Dr. Kuda once Pumpkin returned. I wanted to chase after you, but Dad told me to stay. But, come on, I'll show you Iri. Hitoshi shut the front door firmly and Izuku took his spot on Hitoshi's shoulder. Hitoshi quietly stepped through the house and towards Iri's bedroom. He put a finger to his mouth, telling Izuku to be quiet, and Izuku understood. Then, he opened the door. Iri was laying on her bed. The leg the dog had bitten was wrapped in gauze and out from under the blanket. She was panting through an obvious fever as her face was tinged pink. They said the stress of everything caused her to become feverish. We're hoping she'll break through it tonight. Hitoshi whispered to Izuku. She has to walk on crutches because, like I said, the dog bit her pretty deep. The doctors were able to heal it. but she's still going to have to be off that leg for the next week or so. A hand clamped down on Hitoshi's other shoulder and he let out a soft eep. In alarm, Hisashi pulled Hitoshi back into a hug. Let's leave her be. Yeah. Hello there, Moss. Nice to see you back. Hisashi then reached up and patted Izuku's head. Come on. He urged Hitoshi out of the room and gently shut the door. What's going to happen to the neighbor? Hitoshi asked when he and Hisashi sat down at the table. Izuku was given some milk, lactose-free of course, and he lapped that up with ease. He hadn't even realized how hungry he was and the milk helped keep the hunger at bay. Well, Hisashi put the milk carton off to the side and thought about it. After he heals, Hisashi made a face at that. I suppose he'll be arrested for animal cruelty, neglect, and assault of a hero as he did punch Shouta. It just so happens that Dad hits 10 times harder. Hitoshi shuddered at the memory of Aizawa beating the man into the ground. Hisashi scoffed. Try 100 times harder. Your father can lift up to 158 kilograms. That neighbor had no idea the storm was coming his way when he threw that punch. Any news on Brat? Not yet. Hopefully, she'll be okay. Hisashi whispered. She's a good cat, despite her name. I know. Izuku whispered with the link before he went back to lapping up his milk. Trust me, I know. They wouldn't get their answer until later that night. Near midnight when Aburo, who had flown off to be with Shouta after taking care of Eri, and Shouta came home. Brat was alive, but was it really living? Paralyzed from the neck down, Shouta explained as he put her in a brand new cat bed laid in the living room. Izuku hopped down to greet her, but was grabbed by Aburo. Leave her be, Moss, Aburo whispered into his fur. Shouta gently put a blanket over Brat's lower body. We're going to do what we can, but if she gets worse, or her breathing gets worse, there's a chance we may have to say goodbye, he whispered before scratching behind Brat's ear. However, there is hope. She may also get better, maybe even gain some mobility. We'll just have to see. He sighed before standing up. For now, let's just hope for the best. Izuku felt dread creep into his body as he watched Brat. Her eyes were open, moving around, but she wasn't speaking. She was just watching. Brat was trapped inside of her own body, unable to move. All she could do was lay there and watch them. Probably desperate to move, to run, but all she could do was look. Izuku suddenly felt a fear run down his spine. Bonus, perhaps Tamura should have seen this as an outcome. He just never thought this would be happening in broad daylight. Izuku and he were standing getting ready to come to blows with the two men that had just walked in with a familiar girl in tow. We were told you have something of ours. The dark-haired one, Dabai, growled while his hand started to glow a bright blue. We're going to make our demands swift. Give it back. Tamura shot a glance to Kurogiri, who was already looking ready to jump in. What you did was not cool, it's not yours. People can just take quirks. The masked one, twice, was mumbling to himself in different voices as he had his own weapon out. I'm afraid it can't be done. Her quirk is no longer hers. Is it, little brother? Izuku snorted. Unfortunately not. You, my dear, are now part of the 20%. Izuku pointed at her. It sucks, but that's life for you. It doesn't get easier. Toga gnashed her teeth before she took a knife out from somewhere on her person. Give it back and I may let you keep your eyes. Izuku smirked. Tell you what, he opened his shirt. Hit me with your best shot. I'll give you a free one. And he just left his chest wide open. Young master, please. Kurogiri narrowed his eyes. Don't be reckless, just because you have a healing factor. But rest assured, ma'am, if you throw that knife I won't hesitate. Well, she wasn't going to listen to him as she, indeed, threw her knife directly at Izuku. An orange portal was quick to appear right in front of Izuku, shielding him from the attack. TCH, Kurogiri hissed when he pulled his hand back to show a knife wedged in his hand. How unkind of you. He then yanked the knife out. The wound healed fairly quickly and he only lost a few droplets of blood. That's enough of that. You are no longer welcome at this bar, none of you. Begone. None of them could protest and a huge portal opened up and they were all suddenly falling through the ground. Then, just like that, in a snap of a finger they were gone and the portal closed. Oh man, Tamura scratched at his neck in irritation. Kurogiri, I wanted to dust one of those chuckle fucks. Apologies, young master. Kurogiri sighed and grabbed a rag to wipe the blood off of the floor. But I'd rather the bar not burnt to the ground. And I'd rather you and Izuku stay safe. He grumbled something that sounded suspiciously like Sumi under his breath before he straightened up. You, he then pointed at Izuku, have grown reckless. I agree, the voice on the TV said, making everyone turn. Perhaps a trip to Dr. Garaki is in order. Izuku pulled a face. I don't feel I'm being too reckless. I mean, I do heal. Just because you can heal from things doesn't mean we want you to constantly get hurt or put yourself in danger, Izuku. His father explained it and Izuku puffed out some air. This behavior is unlike you, which is why a trip to Dr. Garaki is needed, clearly. Fine. Izuku rolled his eyes with a bit of a pout as a portal opened in front of him. By the way, Kurogiri, where did you send those three? Away from us. Somewhere where they'll surely be out of our hair. Kurogiri told Izuku as the boy stepped through the portal. Trust me, I don't think they'll be bugging us after this. Meanwhile, Toga huffed as she stood unsteadily on her feet. With Dabai and Twice both helping her stand, she looked around in confusion. This place was different. Where are we? She could only inquire while looking around. It was some sort of simulation. There were various sorts of disasters around them. Dabai and Twice both looked around in equal confusion. Dabai shook his head. I don't. The alarm that cut him off was loud. It made the three of them cover their ears in shock. It was less than a minute where they were suddenly surrounded by heroes. More specifically, UA heroes, as this was in the middle of a school day and it didn't take long for the updated security for the USJ to pick up on three outsiders. Well, Nedzu, who was sitting on Aizawa's shoulder, was grinning. What have we here? After a week, Eri was off of her crutches and Brat had a routine. The neighbor was arrested and his dog found. If Hitoshi heard right, the dog was put down for attacking Eri and for being vicious, so while things weren't perfect, at least it was looking up. Just a little. Still, every time Hitoshi had to look at Brat, the poor cat just lay there trapped in her own body, unable to move. He felt sadness and he knew he wasn't alone. All of the cats all took turns staying with her and probably talking to her to keep her company. It was like clockwork. Izuku always stayed the longest with her. He would groom her, rub against her, and wouldn't leave her side even when it was time for feeding, as she had to be bottle-fed now. The only times he ever left her side was when he had to leave for school with Hitoshi or when it was time for bed. Though on a few occasions he was caught sleeping next to the poor thing. Hitoshi made sure to give Bratz lots of scritches and lovin' when he passed her. I don't understand, Yuri told him on this day. She was sitting down next to Brat's bed. Her bed leg stretched fully out so she wouldn't aggravate the still healing dog bite. Her leg was bandaged still and needed to be cleaned every 4 hours. When it was getting cleaned, Hitoshi could see that the dog not only left a bad bite but also left a huge bruise around the bite, so her leg was still tender. What don't you understand? Hitoshi asked her and she frowned. Why can't Brat move? And yet she's still alive. It's confusing. Hitoshi softened his gaze as he reached over and patted her long hair. You see, the dog broke her spine. The spine is our main nervous system, and because hers is broken, she lost the ability to move anything below her neck. He explained to her as gently as he could. Eri stared at Brat. Daddy said I couldn't heal her because my quirk is a stockpile. And she's too complex. More complex than the bugs I've rewound. But I think I can. Eri reached for Brat and Hitoshi put his hand right on top of her tiny horn. It's not your responsibility, Eri, Hitoshi told her in a soft tone. Before any more could be said, Aburo came up to them. What are you two doing? He asked in a very obvious mock stern tone. He even put his hands on his hips and leaned down. It made Hitoshi smile a little. Just hanging around Brat, he answered, and Aburo smiled. That's good, but we're going to have you two to get cleaned up for dinner. Toshinori is coming by with whatever this big deal is that he needs to talk to all of us about. Aburo shrugged and Hitoshi nearly slapped himself. He forgot all about the dinner with Toshinori. Toshinori wanted Hitoshi to be his new successor. But if Hitoshi's fathers can't weigh in, then Hitoshi refused to even hear Toshinori out. And tonight was the fateful dinner for such a discussion. Okay, Papa, Eri grunted and stood up gently, being mindful of her leg, before she limped off towards her bedroom to get changed out of her baseball outfit. Hey, Aburo spoke and gently tapped Hitoshi's shoulder to get his attention. Yes, can you give us a little heads up on what this dinner is about? Aburo asked him, and it made Hitoshi frown just a little. Hitoshi rubbed at the back of his head and felt himself pull a face. I want to, but at the same time I think it's best if Toshinori explains it. If I tell you, it'll just confuse you guys even more. He told Aburo the best he could. Aburo frowned at this, but still he let it go. All right, I trust you. Go on and clean up. Aburo shooed Hitoshi towards his bedroom and Hitoshi left to go and clean up. Izuku watched this before resting his head across Brat's shoulders. He gave soft purrs to help comfort Brat. Brat gently nudged Izuku back weakly. You shouldn't stay with me, little one. Brat told him. I'm sure you have better things to do. Izuku shrugged. I don't exactly have a planner open. He reassured her before nudging against her head and keeping her close. Izuku could feel Brat's mood sadden as her ears dropped and her frame hitched like she was getting ready to cry. I hate this, she whispered. I keep trying to move my legs, to move my paws and tail, but nothing happens. All I can do is lay here and watch. Watch as you all move on with your lives, and I'm just here, forced to wear what they call a diaper and need to be changed every few hours. I don't even feel like a cat anymore, she confessed in a soft and pain-filled whisper. Izuku didn't say anything. He couldn't say anything. The words "I'm so sorry" died on his tongue. I'm so sorry, Izuku. His mother cried as she hugged him tightly that fateful night after learning of his quirkless diagnosis. How helpless he felt after hearing those very words. How his mother was sorry that he was quirkless. Izuku blinked his own tears back as he buried his face into her fur. Somebody has to keep you warm, he could only think to finally say after a few moments passed between them. Thank you, she whispered and then pressed her head against the crook of his neck. Hitoshi and Eri both washed up, and by the time they were clean and food was on the table, Toshinori knocked on the door. Izuku's ears went back when Aizawa welcomed the man in. Toshinori looked relatively nervous as he stepped into the house. He slipped out of his shoes and put on some house slippers before walking to the table. He sat down at the table next to Hitoshi. For a moment he looked like he was going to speak, just start off with what he wanted. But then he spotted Eri sitting at the table. "Let's eat first," Toshinori hummed before smiling. "Then I'll explain everything." So, they ate and the silence was loud. It was stiff and uncomfortable. It made Izuku glad he was just in the living room speculating and not actually sitting with Hitoshi. Izuku passed the time by grooming Brat, mainly around her head and ears where she can't get any more. "So where's little Masi? I told you to stop calling me that." Izuku thought in anger, and he saw by the way Hitoshi perked that he accidentally used telepathy. The message was not relayed. "He's over with Brat." Hitoshi answered Toshinori and then pointed over in the direction. Toshinori turned and smiled at Izuku. Izuku's ears went back and he made it a point to get up and turn around so his back was directed at Toshinori. Then he laid right back down. "Still don't like me, I see," Toshinori whispered as he was, Izuku presumed, making a hurt gesture with his hand over his heart. Shouta gave a bit of a chuckle. Why? Because he now knew why Izuku didn't much care for the #1 hero anymore, but he kept this to himself, unaware that Toshinori knew the truth, who, in turn, was unaware that Shouta knew the exact same thing that he knew. If that made any lick of sense. Dinner continued as normal after that, still stiff and quiet as everyone ate their meal. It wouldn't be long before people finished and plates started clearing off the table, with people going to sink to wash off their plates. One by one the others came back and sat at the table, waiting for Toshinori to speak. He didn't. He kept looking at Eri and then back at one of the Fosters. Not trying to seem rude, Toshinori finally said when the tension got just a little too thick for everyone's liking. "But this conversation isn't really suited for those of younger ages. If possible, could young Eri not be here?" The tension seemed to rise as all the adults bristled visibly. Hell, Izuku was one step away from bristling. Mother Pumpkin came up to him and Izuku shushed him swiftly. "It depends. What is this all about exactly, Toshinori?" Shouta was finally the first to break the icy tension. He had his hands clasped in front of him tightly and his gaze was unwavering as he stared the man down. "A government secret," Toshinori said softly. "That's what? Government?" Hazashi started to repeat but slowly just to make sure he heard every word right. "Secret." Oboro finished, his shoulders tensed now. All three men seemed to have gained telepathy as they looked from one another as if silently speaking. Finally, they nodded in agreement. "Eri, please go to your room," Oboro stated softly. Eri looked at everyone before getting out of her seat and slowly walking to her bedroom, clearly confused and maybe just a little hurt by her exclusion. Still, her door shut and that just left the adults and Hitoshi. "Okay, now, talk." Shouta's voice left no room for argument or delays as he stared Toshinori down. Toshinori sighed deep from his soul. "As everyone is currently aware, I'm not in the best of shape right now. My health is deteriorating and it's high time I get a successor. I don't like where this is going," Hazashi muttered in a low tone as he looked over his glasses at Toshinori. Still, Toshinori continued as he tried to look past the Foster's hard stares. "And to put it rather bluntly, I would like to take young Hitoshi under my wing to be my successor, the next symbol of peace." Hitoshi scoffed and it made Toshinori turn to look at him. "There was nothing about me being the next symbol of peace, my guy." Hitoshi almost laughed and put a hand on his head as he tried to wrap his head around it. "I can barely protect myself. I can't be the next person people look up to as a god." Hitoshi shuddered. "Okay, so yeah, he doesn't want to be your next symbol, but why do I feel like there's more?" Oboro's eyes narrowed and had an almost sinister gleam behind them. Toshinori cleared his throat. "Well, the thing is, in order for him to be my next predecessor I need to give him my quirk." Silence. Dead silence. "You're joking." Aizawa scoffed next. "I'm not. My quirk is called One for All. It's a quirk that goes back over 200 years. It had 8 total successors, myself included. It's a stockpile quirk that grows stronger with each and every user, and it will grow Hitoshi's own quirk in such a way that I bet he won't even need a response. He could just brainwash whomever he seems fits." Toshinori made a grandstand as he relayed all this information to everyone sitting at the table, and Izuku only snorted. "Something doesn't feel right, Hitoshi. He's only telling you the good. Nothing about the bad, and you know as well as I do every quirk has a drawback," Izuku told his friend. Well, Hazashi was the one to ask that very question. "Yeah, and the drawback to such a quirk?" Hazashi probably made it a show as he tucked his hair behind his ear, revealing his hearing aids. "The more powerful the quirk, the stronger the drawback. Something we're all well versed in, mind you." Toshinori gave a soft breath. "Well, he would need to work out a lot as he needs to be a certain strength. Okay, and how much does he need to lift? Oboro inquired. 600 at a minimum, and if he doesn't then ... well ... 1 for all is a very strong quirk, you see, and if he attempted to use it now he could blow all of the limbs off of his body. Every one of the Fosters scoffed in their shock. Even Hitoshi looked at Toshinori like he lost his mind. Are you kidding me? This quirk is so strong that I could die. Hitoshi laughed, but it was a mirthless, shocked laugh. On only if you don't reach the requirements. Toshinori backpedaled. As long as you can weightlift 600 pounds. Why? Shouta stood up now and put both of his hands on the table as he stared Toshinori down. It wasn't a question but almost a statement. Toshinori treated it as a question. Well, it's like I said. If he doesn't reach upwards of 6, then his tie was grabbed and wrapped tightly around Shouta knuckles and the man yanked upwards. No, why my son? I'm sure there are literally an endless amount of people you could choose from that can reach that ridiculous requirement. Why are you choosing my son? Why does this feel weirdly deliberate? In fact, Shouta's eyes narrowed deadly at Toshinori as he stared at the man in front of him. Why does it feel like you purposely went after Hitoshi? I've been wondering that as well, Oboro added, and he crossed one leg over the other then leaned back into his seat. Toshinori shut one eye as he gave a weak gag. It seemed like he wasn't going to give the information up, like he still wanted some things to be kept as a secret. Vestiges. Hitoshi spoke up and it made everyone turn to look at him. He mentioned something about vestiges wanting me. Okay, the quirk may ... or may not ... be haunted by the user's past. Toshinori gagged. They wanted Hitoshi because they want to be closer to his. Toshinori cut himself off and Izuku's ears perked. Blood dribbled out of Toshinori's mouth as he put both hands around Shouta's hand with his tie in an iron grip. What? Shouta demanded with genuine confusion. Toshinori coughed up and finally he just pointed. He pointed directly at Izuku and Izuku turned around to look at him. The vestiges ... they want to be closer to Moss. I can't give one for all to Moss and they know this. They know that both Moss and Hitoshi are connected with some sort of mind link. So, their next best option is me. Hitoshi breathed out in bewilderment. They want to spy on us. Not spy, keep close. Why? Shouta pulled up on the tie just a little tighter in his grip. Toshinori's breathing picked up a little more rapidly as he tried to struggle out of Shouta's grip. That's just a cat. You said it yourself. Izuku Midoriya is the son of All for One. All for One, Shouta whispered in confusion. Oboro looked at Hisashi. That sounds like one for all. Hisashi finished and both men then stood. That sounds like a bit more than a coincidence to me. Yes, one for all and all for one are related. If you let me go I can tell you the story. No, Aizawa put Toshinori down and let go of the other man's tie. If I'm being honest, from just what you told me, I'm not comfortable with this at all. Then he put his hands in his pocket. Oboro nodded. I have to agree. Not only does this quirk sound dangerous, but the whole ordeal is making my head spin. He put his hand to his head as if trying to steady it. I can't say I'm a fan. Hisashi narrowed his eyes and just shook his head. Yeah, you don't have to tell me twice. Apparently 8 ghosts want our son to have this super powerful quirk because they want to be closer to our cat. It was one last-ditch effort. Your cat is Izuku. We know. All 3 men quickly cut Toshinori off before he could speak anymore. Shouta then explained it. We were told a week prior. Toshinori, we know Moss is Izuku, or at least he's Izuku's soul. Izuku looked over his shoulder at All Might before raising his nose up at the man. And thus we know why he doesn't like you. Toshinori's eyes narrowed suddenly. Okay ... then were you informed that the Namu that's running around in Izuku's body is attached to Moss? That the Namu can look into Izuku's own memories? Oh, this was the last-ditch effort. The vestiges know, and the vestiges, if they can just get close enough to Moss, even if through Hitoshi, can use this to help take down All for One once and for all. Shouta's hand rose and Toshinori stopped speaking. Why is it the vestiges' responsibility to take down this man? Why are there 7 holders? In fact, I'm led to believe that much like Nai's and Moss here, All for One and One for All are connected in a way that can't be broken. Let me ask you this much ... how did you get that injury? And most importantly ... if you hand this quirk down to my son. Shouta leaned in so the two of them were nose to nose. Will it be his responsibility to take down this All for One next? Toshinori swallowed hard as he looked into Shouta's eyes. Shouta narrowed his eyes. We're done here. And he turned away, waving Toshinori off. Shout, you know where the door is, Toshinori. You aren't using my child as a pawn in whatever this is. Shouta gave a grumble as he looked back at Toshinori. In fact, Shouta now looked over his shoulder at Toshinori, his eyes now flashing red. I'm glad you told me all about this, so I can say this with utmost clarity. You aren't asking anyone else in my class to be your successor, and if I learned that you did, I'll beat you into the ground personally. Understood? Toshinori swallowed before giving a nod. Yes, good. Toshinori would then sigh out before he ultimately retreated with his tail between his legs. Hitoshi leaned his face on his hand. He looked to be deep in thought as his eyes were glazed over while he started off in space. The space cadet would come down seconds later and then look at his dad's. I knew there was more than what he was trying to tell me. Oboro gave a hum. So, he tried to get you to take his quirk before he told us. He then looked angry at this but would be calmed down when Hitoshi made a so-so gesture. Yes and no. He wanted me to gain muscle mass first. He tried to take me to Takoba and he wanted me to clean it every day for 4 hours to gain muscle. Shouta's right eye twitched. He is the #1 hero and he can't afford a gym membership. I mean community service and all that. But regardless, he implied that he wanted to keep it a secret between us, but I told him I wouldn't even consider it unless you guys knew and weighed in. Hitoshi chewed on the inside of his cheek in thought and suddenly Shouta's hand dropped into his hair and Shouta gently ruffled Hitoshi's hair. You did good. That thing almost doesn't sound like a quirk. It sounds like a curse. Oboro weighed in. A curse you pass down rather than pass on. I'm glad you thought rationally. I bet he was just telling you all of the good and none of the bad, right? Hitoshi gave a nod. Izuku crossed one paw over the other. A quirk called One for All. One that would be passed down from user to user. One that All for One wants to get his mittens on. Then Izuku perked his ears up in thought. Could it be? Before he vanished. Before Dad went to fight All Might. Before he vanished. I have a surprise lined up for you, but I have to go out and get it first. His father whispered into his ear that fateful day he would leave and never return. Izuku shook his head. No, he wanted to laugh. No way in hell. Yet, he wasn't so sure about that anymore. It was now a beautiful Saturday afternoon. School on Friday was cut short because of another USJ break-in. Hitoshi was finished with ballet training, and now he was standing in front of a mirror looking at himself. I'm going to Takoyami's house tonight and I'm debating if I should change and just wear jeans. I mean ... he is going to teach me how to wield a sword. Hitoshi tilted his head as he looked at the skirt he was wearing and then went over to a set of black jeans hanging up in his closet. Izuku shrugged. Wear whatever is comfortable, I say. Now see, you Hitoshi pointed at Izuku. Or a cat, you don't get to say that. You don't wear clothes outside of a tie for school and a harness. I dunno, I had to wear that onesie, which, by the way, wasn't comfortable. Izuku snorted back at Hitoshi before he made himself into a loaf on the bed. Hitoshi gave another hum before he stripped out of his skirt and tossed it on his bed, tossing it on Izuku in the process. Hey, I'm not a hamper. Izuku huffed and then he wiggled out from under the fabric. Hitoshi was already hopping into his pants. Sorry, I decided on the jeans. I don't know how Takoyami's parents will take to a boy in a skirt. Izuku knocked the skirt to the ground with ease and then looked at Hitoshi, who was finished buttoning up his jeans and was now changing out of his shirt into a baggy t-shirt. So, when are we leaving for Takoyami's? Hitoshi paused and started to dress a little more slowly. About that ... Izuku perked his ears up at Hitoshi's sudden reluctance. Then, Izuku narrowed his eyes. We aren't going. I'm going to Takoyami's. You're staying here. There was a heavy pause between them as Hitoshi just stared at Izuku, who, in turn, just stared at Hitoshi. Then, don't be upset, Moss. It's just that, 1, the Takoyamis are birds. Maybe not all of them, but some, and I don't know if a family of birds will appreciate me bringing a cat in. 2, I don't know if they have any allergy to you. And finally, it'll be rude for me to just bring you unannounced. Maybe another time. You'll live for a few hours without me. Fine. Izuku sighed and stood up from the bed. He stretched himself out and then gently clawed at the bedding below. Brat probably needs the company anyway. Go, have fun. That's the spirit. Hitoshi booted Izuku's nose with his finger. Getting replaced with a bird, how is that fair? Don't be dramatic. I wouldn't replace you for the world and you know that. Yeah. Then Izuku left Hitoshi to his own devices as he retreated to the living room. Brian was already making small talk with Brat. Izuku could last a few hours without Hitoshi. He's done so in the past, before he knew who Hitoshi was. Of course, if anything goes wrong, Izuku had the mind link. So, there was that. Yeah, he told himself when Hitoshi walked out the door without him when Takoyami greeted Hitoshi at the door. He would be just fine without his friend for a few hours. That's why Izuku would sit by the door and wait for Hitoshi to return. Because he'd be just fine without him. Bonus, Takoyami's, or rather Fukumi's mother Sora Takoyami was the bird. Her and Fukumij looked identical. He was a tiny version of her, almost only she was fully a bird. She had deep black feathers that ran along her entire body, tail feathers that poked out from behind, and of course, wings. Don't let the wings fool you or anybody, however, she was strong. She had to be. She was a professional blacksmith for heroes. Fukumij's father Kenzo Takoyami was a different story. He was a tiny man with bright orange hair and orange freckles lining his face and body alike. He was fully human and he liked to birdwatch in his spare time and was currently a stay-at-home dad for Fukumij's baby sister only 3 years old. No quirk yet, but she certainly had her father's orange hair and freckles. Kenzo had a sentient quirk. His quirk being a simple black bird that was attached to him, kind of like Dark Shadow, but clearly not as intense and much smaller. Sora, on the other hand, oh dear, I'm a bird. That's my quirk. That would make a lot of sense. Alright boys, weapons. Sora made a motion with her feathers and both boys surrendered their weapons. I may be a blacksmith, but I'm still a mother. Your parents will roast me for dinner if I let you train with weapons unsheathed. She then grabbed Fukamin's sword and sheathed it with a sheath. Then she looked at Hitoshi's dagger and she paused. How curious, she whispered and turned the dagger over in her wings a few times. Where did you get this dagger? She inquired and Hitoshi tensed up. I found it, he admitted. The crime scene wasn't active. Then he backpedaled. I mean, it wasn't a crime at all. I just found it. Sora just gave him a curious look before snorting. Kids, alright, well, I'm trusting this wasn't a murder weapon then. I just asked because this is my own work, and I don't exactly sell to minors. Then she sheathed it with a perfect sheath. Don't take those sheaths off and be careful. Those are weapons, not toys. Do you two understand? Yes, ma'am, Hitoshi respectfully answered with a bow. Of course, mother. I don't plan on battle training. And even if I were, we would do broom handles or even wooden swords. I just want to show him how to wield. Good, off you two go. Don't hurt each other. Then her mask would lower back down over her face and the two would go off. Go easy on a newbie. Hitoshi joked and Takoyami smiled a soft smile. Of course, short bonus, something was outside. Pumpkin didn't know what, but it was out there in the darkness. It made his fur stand on end and made him back away. Couldn't the others feel it? A hiss left his mouth as whatever was outside just stared from the window. Their eyes seemed to glow an ominous green from the distance. Was it human? He didn't think so. Pumpkin's whole body bristled up as another hiss left his mouth. The humans and others were asleep, but not him. This was his house and it was his job to watch over the others. Pumpkin looked back at Brat, tearing his eyes away from the window just a moment. Then he looked back. A yowl ripped itself from his throat and he jumped off of the couch as the thing was pressed tightly against the window now. The thing, it looked human, but Pumpkin could see it wasn't. The thing just smiled a crazed smile before it spoke. It only said two words that would send Pumpkin flying through the house like a bat out of hell. Mother's home. When the humans and other cats would get up to investigate, there was nobody outside the window nor anybody in the area. Still, Pumpkin would look over at his mother Moss and would just shudder. The visit had happened so suddenly that it caught everyone off guard. It was a rare night in their household, meaning that all three husbands were home. They were all lazing about as it was Monday after school. Hitoshi was doing his homework at the table while Eri colored happily next to him. Moss was asleep in Hitoshi's lap, with Hitoshi occasionally giving his companion some pats. Shouta was in their personal gym working out while Hisashi and Aburo were both in the kitchen getting dinner started. All in all, it was just a lazy day leading into the evening. Then someone knocked on the door, making everyone turn towards it in confusion. Are you expecting someone? Aburo was first to ask as he poked his head out of the kitchen and was drying his hands with a paper towel. No, Hitoshi answered while shaking his head, and Aburo sauntered towards the door. Before he opened it, someone knocked again and Aburo opened the door. Can I help you? Aburo inquired, and Hitoshi, as well as Eri, both looked back at him. I'm with the Hero Public and Safety Commission. Hitoshi nearly jumped up at those words as he grabbed Moss and picked him up. Moss gave a mew of dissatisfaction. What gives? Don't talk. Act like a normal cat. Hitoshi demanded quickly. I would like to tour your home. The person, a man, asked Aburo. Nothing serious. I just need to see if a couple of claims I heard were true or not. I see. Aburo's shoulders were tense as he blocked the man's view of the inside of their home. Hitoshi saw as Aburo had a grip on the doorframe, and Hitoshi could see that Aburo was clutching it pretty hard. Can I ask what these claims are exactly? Aburo demanded, and Hitoshi could just see that Aburo was trying to remain calm and stoic. Eri, Hitoshi whispered and gently gave his sister a little shake. Eri looked up at him with innocent eyes. Go get Shouta. Tell him it's important. Eri tilted her head but obeyed. She gently got out of her chair and went to the homemade gym to go and get Shouta. I'm sorry, I can't tell you why. But if you kick up a fuss, I have the papers right here. We have the right to search as we see fit. The commission representative spoke a little more sternly towards Aburo. Aburo looked back at Hitoshi, and Hitoshi held on to Moss a little tighter. Moss reached back and grabbed Hitoshi's shoulder with his paw, his claws digging into Hitoshi's shoulder. Come on in. Aburo's voice was tense as he moved out of the way to let the man in. This man looked so bored as he strolled in with a clipboard in his hands. His hair was grayish-white and bushy. He just looked both tired and bored. Hisashi, dear, we have company. Aburo's voice was certainly tense as he called out to Hisashi. Company? Oh. Hisashi's voice became a little more serious as his eyes fell on the commission representative. Hisashi's eyes narrowed a little as he walked into the dining room. His eyes gazed past Hitoshi and Izuku when Hisashi put his hand on Hitoshi's other shoulder. Hello, I'm Yokimaru. The commission member bowed in greeting. Don't worry, I'm just here to check up on claims. Claims? Huh. Shouta came into the dining room with Eri clinging to his pants as she stared at the stranger. And what kind of claims are we talking about here? Shouta demanded in a cool tone as he reached behind and put a hand on Eri's head to keep her calm. I can't discuss that with you. I'm just here to see if they're real or not, and if you have a problem with it you can bring it up to Madam President herself. Yokimaru's voice never rose or even became combative as he just stared at Shouta with the same bored and tired expression. Shouta stared the man down with his own bored expression, but Hitoshi knew that was just a mask. I see, Shouta muttered. Then at least grace us with what you'll be searching for. I just need to ask a few standard questions and look around. That is all, the man insisted as he tapped his pen against his clipboard. Very well. What are your questions? Aburo was the one to ask next. Yokimaru's eyes went from Aburo and seemed to lock onto Moss. Moss's ears went back and Hitoshi quickly moved him from his shoulder and back to his lap. Act like a normal cat, Izuku, I'm begging you. Hitoshi risked the mind link as his back was to Yokimaru and he was sure the man couldn't see him. Well, the first question is towards your children. Shinsu. Hitoshi looked over his shoulder at the man once the link was cut. That's me, but please, call me Hitoshi. The man's black eyes didn't look impressed at Hitoshi's demand as he looked at Hitoshi up and down. Hitoshi was in his school uniform with his blazer hanging up in his room. However, he was in his skirt and not in pants today, and he wondered for a moment if this man was judging him for this fact. Probably. Yes, well, don't worry, the questions are standard. What's your quirk? Hitoshi's mouth twitched a little as he looked up at Hisashi, who tightened his grip ever so slightly on Hitoshi's shoulder. And that should matter why? Hisashi demanded. It's just standard questioning, sir. Brainwashing. Hitoshi whispered so lowly that he was surprised if Yokimaru could hear him. I can brainwash people and animals as long as they respond to me. HM still didn't look impressed as he wrote this down. I see. Now it says in your file that you lived with your uncle before you were fostered by the The man sighed and inhaled a deep breath. Aizawa Shirakumo Yamada family, correct? Yes, sir. Hitoshi gently scratched under Moss's chin as he looked away from the man. Whatever happened to your uncle? Hitoshi frowned. Well, after he shot me I can't say for sure. He spoke nothing but the truth. Hitoshi didn't know what became of his uncle after that fateful day. Hitoshi was growing to hate that little hum Yokimaru would give as he wrote this all down. And your cat? How long have you had that cat? What does my son's cat have to do with anything? Shouta jumped in before Hitoshi could answer. Please, don't make this difficult. It's just a question. We know he goes everywhere with that cat and only wish to know how a cat managed to get to allergen detection status. A status mostly reserved for dogs. Mossy was a gift. Eri spoke excitedly and made them all turn to look at her in surprise. Right, Daddy? You got Moss for Hitoshi at the pet store as a birthday present. Yeah, that's right. Shouta smiled a soft smile as he ruffled Eri's hair. Moss, you see, was a birthday present. Sorry, I can't produce paperwork claiming as such. The owner was just giving cats away. As for the allerg, Yokimaru rose his hand to silence Shouta before he could finish. I remember asking your son and not you. His tone was clipped as he focused on Hitoshi once more and Hitoshi swallowed a little. I'm allergic to shellfish, you see. And one day I had a reaction. It was by accident as I hadn't told my dads that I was allergic to shellfish. Hitoshi started slowly as he met the man's gaze. Moss was able to detect that there was shellfish in my meal and alerted me. We learned that he's good at that. He's really good at alerting me if there's any shellfish nearby. Moss jumped from Hitoshi's lap into Hitoshi's and probably everybody else's horror. He started to rub himself against Yokimaru's legs. Moss was rubbing himself against Yokimaru like they were once owner and pet as he mewed and demanded the man's attention. Oh may I? Yokimaru inquired as he pointed down at Moss. He usually doesn't like being picked up. Well, Hitoshi was a liar as when Yokimaru bent down he was more than able to pick Moss up and hold him. What unique coloring. I've never seen a green cat before. He certainly stands out. Yokimaru mumbled as he held Moss by his underarms. Moss mewed at this as he stayed in Yokimaru's hands. Do you have a breed? Yeah, cat. Shouta answered bluntly. He was free. You don't expect him to be a purebred anything, do you? That Cornish Rex in the living room could have fooled me. Yokimaru commented as he continued to move Moss around to look at every detail he could. Maybe it was fate that Tinnitum came out of the room. The little and obviously purebred munchkin cat walking side by side with Brian. The Siamese cat. Yokimaru looked at those two before back at Moss. His face is soft and eyes big. He's fluffy and rounded. All in all a cute cat. If I had to guess his features are similar to that of a Siamese like your friend over there ... but I'm willing to bet he's a ragdoll, aren't you? Yokimaru broke his bored tone to blow kisses at Moss. He's such a unique cat, however. A cat with green fur and green eyes. Oh now look at that. The man lifted Moss's head up to look at his necklace. Sir, surely you didn't come here to ogle our unique cat, did you? Shouta inquired a little more bluntly, which caused Yokimaru to look back at him. Right, apologies. Now, I just need to ask. We've heard rumors of your cat not only being smarter than average but also claims that they may even have a healing factor. Is this true? He looked at Hitoshi as he asked this. No, he's just a cat. But you agree he has some sort of intelligence as he knows how to detect allergens? Yokimaru inquired next as he now stared Hitoshi down in a gotcha moment. No more than the average dog. Hitoshi shrugged. But this isn't a dog, is it? Izuku started to kick just a little, a clear sign of a cat wanting down. Yokimaru granted this as he put Izuku down. Once down, he started to walk away with his tail high and flicking. He almost looked like a normal cat. He's not as smart as you think he is, sir. Watch. Hitoshi grabbed some paper, balled it up, and whistled. Moss, here. And he tossed the paper. Moss just watched as the paper rolled past him before he started to lick at his paw almost like he was bored. See, then, if he's not as smart as you claim him to be, then surely you'll allow me to take him for a day to have him tested officially. No. The whole family spoke at once in a moment of unison and hatred of the Safety Commission. And pray tell why. If Yokimaru's eyes seemed to narrow as he stared at the family as a whole. He's just a normal cat, then it shouldn't be an issue, should it? Because the commission has a history with abusing animals. There it was. Oboro just came right out and said it. And we happen to love all of our animals, so, no. You aren't taking our Moss, not unless you want to fight. Then Oboro tensed as he got down like he was ready for a fight. It was instant as Hisashi and Shouta also seemed to get ready as all raised their fists up. 3 heroes versus you, do you think he'll win? Shouta inquired next, which made Yokimaru narrow his eyes at them. No, I don't suppose I will. However, if you have nothing to hide, then surely you have nothing to fear. Let me ask you one final time, is that cat smarter than average and does he have a healing quirk? No, now get out, if you know what's good for you. Shouta demanded with a snarl gracing his lips. I see. The pen stopped writing and Yokimaru looked at Moss. Moss, or rather Izuku, was pretending to be interested in the fallen paper ball as he was now batting it back and forth. I have just one more question. That girl, what's your quirk, sweetie? Rewind. She whispered fearfully as she now clung to Shouta's leg for dear life. I can. You don't have to tell him anymore, princess. Hisashi shushed her before she could reveal just what she can do with her quirk. All right, well, I can tell when I'm not welcomed. I'll see myself out. You do that, Oboro told him rather bravely. All 3 men had their eyes trained on the man as he walked up to the door and opened it. But he paused before leaving. He shot a look at Hitoshi. Expect another visit very soon. We at the Hero Public and Safety Commission don't like being told no. Then ... he was gone. The family didn't officially relax until his car was out of the driveway. Once he was gone, did they all slump their shoulders and sigh with relief? Iri, where'd you come up with that lie? Hitoshi inquired as Iri was the one to pick Moss up. A girl at baseball practice got a cat for her birthday? I dunno. I thought it would be best if he didn't know that Moss technically found and saved us ... Am I in trouble for lying? She asked fearfully. Normally, yes. Shouta cracked his neck before gently putting his hand on her head. But this time you did good, so no. Not this time. Iri held Moss like a toddler and Izuku spoke in Hitoshi's mind. It's hard being dumb, I want you to know that. Yeah. Hitoshi sighed and came up to Moss and Iri alike. You did wonderful, Moss. He was actually a normal cat. He almost looked boring. Hisashi gave an uneasy laugh as he gave Moss a good scratch up to the head. Good job, Spicy. Shouta was frowning as he stared at Moss. We have a problem now. Shouta knew it sucked being the bearer of bad news, but it was too early for celebrations. In fact, tears were probably going to be coming soon and he hated it. Someone clearly told the commission about Moss and now they want him. Next time they come back they very well could have an order to take. They can't just take him. He's mine. Hitoshi cried almost indignantly. It's my name on the microchip. Shouta gently cupped Hitoshi's cheek and gently thumbed Hitoshi's cheek. I wish it were that easy. But animals are different with the HPSC. If they show an order to take, there's nothing we can do because he, Moss, basically has no rights. Hitoshi's mouth turned into a frown. Well ... what are we going to do? Can't we fight it? We could try but ... they'd win. Their lawyers are top-notch and actually fighting them isn't an option. We were just trying to intimidate him too. Shouta looked at his 2 husbands and they seemed to understand as they looked away almost shamefully. To bide us some time. Oh, Hitoshi didn't like where this was going. Not one bit. Well, what's next? How can we keep Moss safe? He demanded bravely as he looked at his foster dad. Shouta sighed. I have an idea ... It's the safest idea out there but ... You're going to hate it. If it means keeping Moss safe and away from the Safety Commission, I'm willing to do anything. Shouta sighed softly. Let me make a few phone calls. I'm telling you, we didn't want to attack your precious school. Dabai hissed behind the glass pane. His hands were bound in front of him while heavy quirk suppressants ran through his blood as they spoke. We were teleported there. So, let us go and maybe I'll let you live next time we cross paths. Nezu wasn't intimidated as he stared Dabai down. You're an interesting man, Dabai. Interesting and mysterious. Aside from a few assault charges, there's nothing about you that I could find. Nezu clasped his paws together as he flicked his ear at the man. I'm honestly surprised you all came quietly. After the USJ break-in, the three who broke in all but gave up. Well, there was some resistance, but it was stamped out by Shouta, who had his eyes on both Dabai and Twice, thus keeping them from using their quirks. After that, it was relatively easy to get them all in cuffs and in the station. Well, Twice could have made more clones of me, but he was too far, and plus that asshole with the quirk that can cancel quirks stopped me from doing anything. Dabai sighed with a sneer on his lip. Look, can't you just drop the charges? I'm sure Toga is scared and she's quirkless right now. Mrs. Toga is an interesting case. First she had a quirk and now she doesn't, and now her parents are wanting to reclaim her. Fuck her parents. If you give her back to those assholes, I'll kill you myself. Dabai roared behind the glass pane. I'm willing to. Trade. You see, Dabai, we at UA need all the help we can get and where we can get it at the moment. I want to know about the Namu that goes around claiming to be Izuku Midoriya. You've talked with him firsthand, did you not? You talking about that weird kid? The one that took Toga's shapeshifting quirk. That's the one. A Namu, huh? Actually, I'm willing to overlook a lot if you work with us heroes in protecting UA and its students from future attacks. You and Twice. Excuse me. Dabai blinked in surprise. What about this? Dabai vaguely gestured to himself. Screams safe to you. Hear me out. Not like I have anything better to do. Nezu sighed a little as he looked Dabai dead in the eyes. I'm willing to grant Ms. Toga a safe place inside of UAS walls while she's quirkless. We're getting dorms and they're being blueprinted as we speak. Toga will have a place to stay and an education with us. That being said, we need information on the villains, when their next attacks are going to be, and so on. That's where Twice and I come in. You want spies? We do. We want information on Namu, Tamura Shigaraki, and their master, all for one. Look, we tried to kill those fuckers. They're not going to welcome us with open arms, you know. Dabai narrowed his blue eyes at Nezu. Let me tell you something. Play your cards right. Let them treat you as a lackey for a bit, and I guarantee they'll treat you as one of their own in due time. Dabai seemed to listen as he lowered his head and weighed the option. If I say no, you stay locked up, along with Jin, and Mrs. Toga will be returned to her parents. Trust me, this deal with me is your best bet. You'll get the revenge you want in the end, and you get freedom. Dabai snorted and then looked at Nezu. And what's stopping me from just running with Toga and Twice once you set me free? Huh. What's to stop me from burning those fucking dorms to the ground? Huh. Nezu only smiled as he tilted his head. You know you won't get your revenge that way. That's what stops you. That, and you're a fool if you think I won't have safeguards in place for you and your friends. There was a snort from the other before Dabai leaned back into his chair. Give me time to think about it. Of course. Nezu hopped out of his chair. Tick-tock, Mr. Dabai. The clock is ticking and Ms. Toga will be released to her parents before too long. I'll be back tomorrow. Nezu left the visiting area of the jail after that. He gave a little nod to Tsukachi, who waved back at him with a smile. From there, Nezu would check out of the jail and then walk out into the parking lot. He walked up to his car and paused, sniffed the air, before turning. There, Shouta and his family were standing outside waiting for him. Ah, right on time, Shouta. Nezu greeted his friend and employee, but he knew this wasn't a happy occasion, especially not seeing young Hitoshi cry into Moss's fur. Thank you for doing this. Shouta sighed as he came up to Nezu and started to hand things over to the Chimera. Nezu took the things. Our only other option was Toshinori and yeah, we'd rather it be you. Understandable. Nezu unlocked his car door and put the items inside. I'm sorry the commission ambushed you like that, and I really wished I didn't have to do this. Nezu gave a small sigh. But you know he's going to someone trustworthy. And Nezu walked up to Hitoshi and opened his arms. Hitoshi's eyes were wet with tears, and maybe it was petulance that kept him from handing his beloved pet over. Maybe it was just sadness with this whole fucked situation. It was never easy having to rehome a pet. But it needed to be done, for Moss's own safety, and Hitoshi knew this. Which is why it was with a heavy heart that Hitoshi finally handed Moss over. Izuku clung to Hitoshi, as expected. Thankfully the boy was wearing a long-sleeved shirt to keep the nighttime chill at bay. I don't want to go, Izuku cried, but all that came out was a loud and distressed meow. I know, baby. It was a moment of understanding that had Oboro saying that as he and Hisashi had to forcibly retract Izuku's claws from Hitoshi's shirt. I know, it's only temporary. There we go. Nezu hoisted Izuku into his arms and the cat struggled. Hitoshi cried into Oboro's arms as Nezu started walking towards his car. He needs me, Nezu. I can't just leave him. Nezu knew better than to respond as he put Izuku into the back of the car and shut the door. Hitoshi, Nezu called to the boy and bowed respectfully. You have my word. No harm will come to Moss while he's in my care. Besides, it's not like you'll never see him again. Izuku rushed to the back window and started to paw at it while crying loudly. Hitoshi. Netsu got into the driver's seat and would drive away soon after, with Izuku continuing to paw at the back window. Yes, it was a sad situation, but it was for the best, at least for now.